What does he do? Attacks leverage. If he's outside leverage, he doesn't want you to beat him outside. So stem towards him, hold him outside, stamp outside. Drive face, full cell vertical, get into the blind spot, and he absolutely burns him. Corner is lost. He literally has no idea where Wilson is.
Really high floor, really high ceiling. We could be talking about the best corner in the league. Sauce can do that.
This is actual film. This is actual football talk. It's a football show. We're supposed to talk football, not storylines.
And you are watching another edition of Blitz. Kyle, my man, what is up? I missed you.
Missed you too, Joe. Unfortunately, didn't miss that awful feeling of the Jets letdown. Didn't miss that one, but that of course we had to come and see that. So what has it been? 3 weeks since we last spoke?
Yeah, about I think it's just exactly 3 weeks. So I'm excited to talk about. I like the offseason to a certain extent, but I also fucking hate it. Like I do. I hate the speculation of, are we going to get this guy? We heard this leak about this guy. Jason looking for us said this. Our beat said that. That asshole said that. Like, I just hate it. Like, I just like how the NFL season, like we can just evaluate facts of the film versus all this stupid bullshit we're going to have to do for the next month. So I'm really hoping it ends soon. We'll obviously talk about the end of the season a little bit. We're not going to go through it. We're going to talk about the collapse in general. We're going to talk about the OC search, the quarterback options, some of the smoke screens. The thing that I'll warn you the entire offseason about is smoke screen. I don't believe what anybody says right now. I don't give two shits. We'll talk about the draft coming up in the next couple of weeks. Kyle, I haven't gotten to the draft I haven't at all, like nothing. I know absolutely nothing about the draft. I almost plan to keep it that way. I'm doing reviews right now on Sauce, Garrett Wilson, Q. And then I plan on doing an OC review, and I plan on doing a Sauce review. So, not a Sauce review, the QB review. So, I don't know how much we're getting into the draft this year. It might be a little bit different. We get more into free agents before the draft, into the draft more after the draft. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But like I said, I missed it. I didn't miss the Jets. I guess we can talk about that really quickly, and then we'll let people trickle in, and then we'll talk to some people in the chat who I missed all of you as well. I haven't missed people on Twitter. Twitter's brutal, but end of the season, man. Like I was in Costa Rica. It was awesome. By the way, okay. I actually how you're doing, right, Kyle? I'm a little bit rusty.
Yeah, you did.
But
well,
how was your holiday season? How was the last 3 weeks? How do you feel now? Are you ready for the offseason? Are you ready for the draft? Are you ready for the offensive coordinators? Are you ready for the quarterbacks? I really want to know how you are. You kind of gave me the very generic, yeah, I'm good. The Jets weren't good. Like, how are you, Kyle? Come on.
Well, I guess all things considered, I'm pretty good.
There you go.
You want football not to dominate your life. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, rooting for a specific team, does it really affect your life? Does Woody Johnson or the Jets really care about you? No, they don't. No. But there's just something about it, man. Football's special, and you grow attached to a team, and it's kind of silly and goofy, but it's kind of some of those things you can't explain. And it's like, one of the reasons why you work all those hard hours as a cop doing that hard job that you do is so that you can enjoy yourself and enjoy football, right? Like it's one of those things that we live for. I mean, and like I said, it's kind of goofy. Some people who aren't into sports don't get it, but I mean, like, listen, life aside from football, pretty good. And honestly, like, listen, when they lose 6 games in a row, I'm a little bit like, on the one hand, I should be a little bit more interested in the off season, but on the other hand, like part of me is like, okay, let me take a little bit of a break from this. Like, it gets caught up on some other things and stuff, but I'm doing pretty good. Thank you for asking. And it's my fault. I showed up a little late, so you didn't really have time beforehand to ask me how I was doing. But so in terms of the off season, we're going to be doing some draft. I don't see how we can. I mean, like, in Rome, we have the 13th pick, so it's not like we're picking at the end, I know. A couple weeks ago, we were saying, we're finally not going to have, that interesting an off season. And it's like, oh, we will. We drafted a quarterback 2nd overall, just a couple drafts ago, and we're already moving on from him. So we never make the off season boring. Always kings of the off season.
How far we've come from a couple of weeks, before or prior talking about, this off season be really boring. Nope. Another offense to study, another quarterback to study, more of the draft, which, by the way, like, and I'm going to say hello to some of the people in the chat in here. I'm going to crack. I don't have anything else that don't make fun of me, but I'm cracking a White Claw for tonight. I'm drinking because of the Jets end of the season. I haven't had any of you in here, so I'm going to crack a claw.
You deserve it.
But yes. Even though I'm not going to lie, they're going to hit me pretty fast because I put on, I gained like 10 pounds easy on vacation. And then I've been fasting a lot. So I'm at about 24 hours into a fast right now. So these are going to hit me pretty quick. So we'll see where we are in
So do you like
2.5 hours.
185, 190 right now? Something like that?
I'm like 185. I probably went up to like 195 at vacation. I'm down like, I lost like 10 pounds in like 4 days. Cause I fasted 3 24 hours and or 3 24-hour fast in basically 4 days. So
you're fasting to like what, detox?
I fast on midnights in general. People don't want to get it. I fast on midnights in general because it's really shitty to eat at like 3 o'clock in the morning. You just don't process it very well. So I fast in general, but I've been doing a little bit longer. But nonetheless, talking about the draft before we get into the chat, which I really don't want to hit on, but I kind of want to get a general feel with you in terms of who we're getting at pick 13. Is there any like positions right now that you're really, really solely focused on? Again, people are talking like, oh, this guy, Josh Smith in the 4th round. I don't know. It could be a 4th, maybe a 3rd, maybe he'll drop to the 5th. Nobody fucking knows. Nobody knows the day before the draft. Like I see shit on Twitter like, oh, this guy 4th round pick, definitely top 100. It's like bullshit. You have no idea. You watch 2 minutes of a YouTube highlight. You've heard of him one time. So like I am so ready to like cut out the bullshit this offseason, Kyle. So I don't know. I don't want to deal with that shit really. But like in terms of your general feel right now for what you're feeling in the draft, the 1st round, maybe the 2nd round, like where's your headspace at? Obviously, we have a lot to determine in free agency. Who is the quarterback? Who are the receivers? Who is the offensive line? We have a lot of shit to figure out. But in general, what is your feel right now for what you are feelings going to happen or what you want?
I mean, if we're specifically talking pick 13, which is our 1st round draft pick, I'm not thinking receiver at all. I'm not thinking quarterback. Not that we don't need one. We do. I'm just not interested in the whole draft one again, especially, at 13, he's not going to be as good of a prospect, and I'm not interested in trading up and giving up all those assets for a guy. I am interested in offensive line, whether it be tackle. I heard supposedly it's supposed to be a good interior offensive line draft. Not only were we so banged up all year, but the offensive line so late in the season wasn't good. Health is obviously a problem. So I'm thinking offensive line. Is there going to be a safety who's worth? I mean, we definitely need a safety. I mean, it's something you talked about all year. I saw that Michael Nania, the great Michael Nania, co-owner of the website, he's also, beating that drum on Twitter recently, telling people how much of a need it is.
Are people still on the Whitehead train, by the way? I saw Whitehead, but which the Dolphins game, I only watched broadcast. I haven't watched the film. I saw him get trucked by Mostert though.
Oh yeah.
And then,
he did.
I was arguing with a guy for like an hour on Twitter, which I should never do. I'm always like, I'm not going to argue with people who just bring dumb stuff to the table or don't follow me because you're never going to win on Twitter. It's just stupid. It's a waste of my time. But for some reason, he pissed me off and we argued about Whitehead. And like 2 weeks later, he tweeted me. He's like, sorry, bro. I apologize for my mistake. I really don't want Whitehead either. But I think it's only like there's, again, very, very generic with the drafts right now. I know there's a safety from, I think it's Bama who's saying people are saying is worth a 1st round pick. But
it's just kind of like hit or miss. I mean, like, some of the Bama guys, like obviously they've had good secondary guys come to the league, but then they've had guys like Mark Barron who kind of haven't panned out. Obviously Minka panned out, but then the corner that we drafted from Bama to replace Darrelle Revis, D. Milliner, he obviously didn't pan out. But I did hear that there's a safety of Alabama who's supposedly good. I don't remember his name. That's at least a consideration. Linebacker, especially if we're talking for the future. I just praised Michael Nania, and this isn't like really a criticism, but Nania had like kind of like almost like a mid-season tweet where he said Quincy Williams, finally kind of put it all together. There's no doubt about it that Quincy Williams has improved, but just on a week-to-week basis, he always has a big mistake any given week. And he had a couple of those, like, Kenneth Walker, right? Like not missing him in the flat, a couple times on a tackle, and then Kenneth Walker spins for a 1st down. There's like a couple of those moments every game, but then he has that, he had that one big tackle where, I forget, it wasn't Mostert, it was the other Dolphins running back where Quincy, like, just picked him up and like WWE style slammed him, or like, UFC style slammed the guy. And then he does this Quincy celebration, and then Sauce and one other Jets defender get in on it. Like, he's going to have those hype type of plays, but then he's also going to have the brain farts. But the point is that Jets could also use another linebacker too. So could there be a linebacker that's worth 13th? I mean, listen, Mosley, 2nd team All-Pro. I'm kind of surprised he got it, but I think a lot of that's just kind of name recognition too. I mean, listen, he had a fine season, but I find it hard to believe that he's really an All-Pro. And just like when they stacked up, like I saw that, Frankie Lou, who's a guy who I kind of liked, who seems like he's
We
grown
both
a lot
did.
as a player.
We both did. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I remember Frankie Louvu went on Twitter recently this past week, and he was comparing his stats to Mosley's. And I get stats, especially for linebackers and tackles, could be really misleading. But if you're just comparing the stats back to back, I mean, like, Louvu's stats were way better. So I mean, like Mosley, there's no way I don't think you keep him past this year. I know you have to keep him this year, but you also have to prepare for the future with that.
Dude. Yeah.
And dude, also edge rusher, man. Carl Lawson, I know part of it's disappointment, and supposedly the word on the street is that, he kind of tweaked his Achilles and played all through it anyway. And that's great that, he was able to play at that level despite being hurt, but he didn't live up to the contract. Jermaine Johnson, listen, I know that Robert Saleh's kind of, bullish on him and said nice things about him. And you see flashes, and he's really good in the run game, man. Like, and he plays whistle to whistle, but I'm sorry, I really didn't see the growth as a pass rusher all year. So like, could there be an edge guy worth taking at 13? Maybe.
Yeah.
Definitely not going running back at 13. Anyway, those are some just, quick thoughts.
Yeah. It kind of falls in line with what we talked about all season. I would expect it to be an offensive lineman, most likely a tackle, and then linebacker is going to be interesting. You're not paying Mosley $21 million this year. There's absolutely no way he's not worth $21 million. So I think if you designated a post June 1st cut, you could save $17 million and have $4 million dead this year and next year. So maybe they restructure, but you cannot pay him. You cannot pay him $21 million. Quincy, general feels he's probably back. Quan's probably gone. Even if they're both back, I would like a linebacker in the first couple of rounds, at least as a developmental guy. And then safety is obviously a massive need. Whether they keep Whitehead or not, we'll discuss that in the future. We'll go through some of maybe even this show, we'll go through some of the Jets free agents and guys they can cut, but they need at least one starting safety, maybe a starting linebacker, maybe a developmental linebacker. But how much do you really have to invest into the defense to keep it to that top 5, top 10 level defense, wherever you want to rank that defense? Can you save some money cutting a Carl Lawson, giving more reps to Huff and Jermaine Johnson, and invest that money back into the offense, into obviously, offensive line and potentially even receiver, depending on what happens with Corey Davis and just in general. I think to get rid of Barrios, and you need at least a number 4, regardless of getting rid of Davis or not. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. My general feel is offensive line at this point, but let's say hello to some people, then we'll talk about the late season collapse just a little bit. To me, it was disheartening, Kyle.
No touchdowns offensively in 3 straight weeks late in the season.
Yeah, no touchdowns in 3 straight weeks. And I think the stat is, don't quote me on this, I think it's 8 touchdowns in the last 8 weeks. Wow. And 4 of them came against the Bears. Like, that is embarrassing football. I don't give a shit who the quarterback is. I don't. We're not that bad of a team. And like the Seahawks game, like
one of those touchdowns against the Bears, the guy went down with a season-ending injury, and you basically got a freebie on that play.
Yeah, bro. I'm all excited. I get the Jets lost a couple of games. The Lions game, I was there. Disheartening. The Jaguars game, I was there. It sucked. It sucked majorly. But then you get a break the entire Christmas weekend, and you're like, okay, shit. We're still in this. Hopefully the Jets are motivated. And the first play of the game is like a 60-yard Kenneth Walker run. And me and my wife are sitting there. I'm like, it's fucking over. Like, I've seen this shit before. I've seen it.
Wait, she actually watched it with you? She doesn't watch it with you usually.
No, she'll watch the games. Like if you were like, you or like my buddies or whatever, like she's not going to really like chill there and watch the game, but she'll watch. Like she's invested in, like she likes the Jets, and mostly maybe because of my mood for the next couple of days. But like the first play of the game, like it's fucking over. She looks at me, she's like, why do you not even care? Like I've seen this shit before. It's done. We're done.
My wife said something similar too. Like it was, I don't know, it was probably beginning of the 4th quarter or so. And I was just like, usually like no matter what's going on, like I at least want to watch the game live to like know what's going on. But yeah. I stopped like really watching, and I was just like looking at Twitter while the game's on in the background. I wasn't even really watching the plays, and my wife's like, wow, you never do that. And I kid you not, I watch every game live unless there's like on a very, very, very rare circumstances, like a family emergency or something like that.
Yeah.
But the Dolphins game the following week, I didn't even watch it live. I was like, fuck it, I'm going to the gym. I'll watch the shit later so I could speed through the commercials and stuff.
Dude, I was in Costa Rica, and like usually like with Italy at the beginning of the season, I turned off my Twitter, turned off all the notifications. I had no idea what was exactly going on. I watched the game completely surprised. I was like on the beach, like barely with Wi-Fi, like every once in a while getting a refresh on the thing, like Joe Flacco 3-3, 6-3, 9-6, 11-6, where the hell the game was. I didn't even care. Like I barely cared at the end of the seaseason. We were at a certain point in the season, obviously, wherever the worst kind of I don't remember really what I'm saying, but like 5-2, 6-3, 7-4. It's all terrible to lead from those records to 7-10. And at a certain point in the season, Kyle, we're sitting here and we're like, listen, if they only win 9 games, it's disappointing. Imagine if we told ourselves, hey, by the way, you're going to lose 6 in a row now, and you're only going to win 7 games. And they got to 7 wins in the most embarrassing fashion. Like, it wasn't like, okay, you start off slow and you end the season hot. And even with that, we were saying, okay, 7 wins, it depends how we get there. If we get 7 wins, 7 wins is a little bit disappointing. But if it's, okay, the team's injured, they're young, but it's Zach Wilson who's bringing us there, okay, we could deal with it. But we did the exact opposite of that. The quarterbacks absolutely sucked. And we didn't have a late season run. We completely collapsed where we weren't even competitive. We looked like that 2-win team of Adam Gase in 2019, 2020, whatever that year was, more than the Jets of the early season. Like, we were, and excuse my French here, but we were fucking embarrassing the last couple of weeks of the season. I don't give a shit what's happened with injuries.
Funny.
It was embarrassing.
It's funny if you think about it, like that Adam Gase 2020 offense was god awful. But if you just take a snippet of the last couple of games of that season offensively versus this season offensively, the last couple of games, that one was actually better.
Mm-hmm. At least we opened up the game with a touchdown with Adam Gase. True. It was very, very, very disheartening. It was very, very bad. We'll talk about the Mike LaFleur thing. People ask, do you agree with it? The firing, somebody had to be fired. Somebody had, I'm not going to say like scapegoats, but somebody had to be let go. I thought he was more of like a mid offensive coordinator. Now, how do we replace him? If we replace him with another guy who's never called plays before, I'm going to have a problem. Listen, if you hire like, the Eagles quarterback coach, I have some of the names in here who's never called plays. Why do we get rid of Mike LaFleur? And again, to me, he was more like, for lack of a better term, mid or like maybe a little bit below average. And it was interesting how Saleh kind of came out and said, oh, well, I could have got fired after my first couple of years in San Fran, but, they backed me. And then I obviously, turned it around. So like, was there pressure from Woody Johnson? We'll talk about all this stuff in a couple of minutes here. And the thumbnail of the show, High Hawk, it is Lamar Jackson. We'll talk about it. Apparently, John Harbaugh came out and said that he's going to pick the offensive coordinator. He's 200% going to be here. Kyle, what is he like? Again, this is all the offseason shit. Like, what is he going to say? He's not going to say, no, maybe he might be here. We don't really know. Don't give us a lot of trade conversation. Like, they're going to try to get as much as they can. And right now, he's on the Ravens. They're going to say he's going to be a Raven 1,000%. Just like Zach Wilson, instant coffee shit. He's going to start the entire year. He got benched. Sam Darnold, Jet for life. Jamal Adams, Jet for life. Like I don't buy into what any of these coaches say. So just
and the
because
whole
he said that today does not eliminate Lamar
picking
Jackson.
the coach or picking the GM or whatever. I mean, listen, Deshaun Watson, they told him, hey, listen, you're going to have a huge say in what we do going forward too. After they gave him that big, huge contract, and then they didn't give him that, and then he's like, okay, I want to trade, and then
yeah. So I still think it's reality. We'll talk about the quarterbacks in a little while, but people are acting like Lamar Jackson is not a possibility now because John Harbaugh came out and said that. Like, how much shit have we heard from coaches where you just should know at this point not to buy into anything or put any stock into what they say, like this stuff, and Eagle, appreciate you watching, but more stuff leaked out about Carr and McDaniels, and Carr doesn't like to be coached up. Who said that? Is it Jason LaConfora? Is it McDaniels? Is it McDaniels' sisters, cousins, husbands, wives, uncles, grandpa? Like, who knows about this shit? So I'm not buying a Carr doesn't like to be coached up either.
It's just funny. It's funny that you're hearing this 9 years in the league, and it's like I've never heard that before.
Never heard it before.
Whereas McDaniels, who has done great work as an offensive coordinator, but then again, many of these Belichick coaches haven't went on to be good head coaches elsewhere. And let's remember how bad McDaniels was as a head coach and a leader. His first turnaround as a head coach back in Denver 10 plus years ago. Yeah. So, take that with a grain of salt. I mean, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't he have like a bunch of problems with Jay Cutler, who was like the big quarterback of that year he was in Denver? He didn't adjust his offense or whatever to him.
Well, I think the big thing was like that. Didn't he want Matt Castle to come run his offense? And because, obviously, Matt Castle had success in New England in the year that Brady was there. And then, Jay Cutler was supposed to be the future for Denver, But McDaniel says, "Oh, I kind of want my own guy in here." And Jay Cutler gets wind of it. He's like, "Oh, well, fuck it, trade me." So then he ends up going to the Bears. And then apparently McDaniels had a big say in like wanting to draft Tebow and feeling like he could develop him, and that obviously didn't happen. So
yeah. What's up, Fire Sports? Face you shaved. Yes, I left Kyle in the goatee / beard gang. I had to leave you, unfortunately, because the calendar turned to the new year. So not allowed to have facial hair anymore unless it's a mustache, and then I just look like a serial killer. So I don't want that. Joe for OC, I respectfully decline your offer. Let's see. We're back to the same old Jets offseason talk. At least it's actually after regular season. It's not 4 games in. True. And last year it really came after 3 games. Like after that Denver game, I was distraught. Because like you get blown out versus Pats, okay, it happens. But Denver, you get blown out 28-31-0, wherever the hell that game was. The year prior, obviously with Adam Gase. We're talking about the second. Was it the second? The second game was the
49ers
Niners
game
where they opened up with like an 80-yard Mostert touchdown run, or
which was called back by a hold, but still.
Was it? Okay, yeah. And then you have the Colts game. Was the Colts game the game after that they got blown out in that game as well? Yeah, like
Darnold had like 3 picks. He had a nasty red zone pick to the old Florida State corner. I'm forgetting his name, who's currently on the Bills. He had a couple out routes that were late in that game, but he hung them way too far inside. One of them was picked for a pick 6, throwing to Lawrence Cager. It was bad.
Yeah. What's up, Mike? Give me QB. Which, by the way, the QB stuff is, and again, this is why I'm not on Twitter. But like, and I'm not talking about anybody in specific, which I have some names in mind. But the amount of fans who are Jets fans who have seen Greg McElroy and Christian Hackenberg and Geno Smith when he was bad, and Sanchez and Darnold and Zach Wilson, all these guys completely just shit on Aaron Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Derek Carr is astonishing to me. How many people think Derek Carr is a trash quarterback because they watched 2 games maybe of this year, heard some shit about bad weather, and now he's bad. I went back and I've only watched like 4 games of 2021, Kyle, because I want to get a little bit of a feel for him, really watching each individual snap of him for a couple of games. I still think, at least of what I watched last year, he's a 12 to 15 top 12 to 15 type quarterback. But because he had a bad end of the season this year, people are talking about him like he's absolute garbage. Derek Carr consistently puts up 4,000-ish yards. He's like a 2.1, 2.2 touchdown to interception ratio. So he's probably going to get you. Let's say he comes to the Jets next year, disappointing season. He throws for 24 touchdowns, 11, 12 picks, and 4,300 yards. Would break like multiple Jets record. Like, how are we shitting on Derek Carr so much? Because again, how many games of him did people who shit on him really watch? Or did you watch highlights? Or did you hear it on ESPN? Or did you watch that one pick he threw late in the game versus whoever that was on ESPN this year? Like, so the QB talk around Jets fans, and even Lamar Jackson, he's trash.
I think so much of the Derek Carr hate is because QB wins. I think way too much people put so much into the QB win stat, and that's part of the reason why some of the Zach Wilson hypers this year. And granted, listen, we were Zach Wilson fans of him coming out, but we jumped off the train at some point this year around mid-season or so. People defending him, even though clearly when Mike White came in for those couple of games and started, there was still some people saying, they need to go back to Zach Wilson. I mean, I know Mike White was terrible in that Seahawks game, but aside from that, he was pretty solid when he did come in this year and way better than Zach Wilson. But so many people, the Jets were 5-2 with Zach Wilson. So much people put so much into the QB win stat, and it's really a ridiculous stat, honestly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
By the way, I missed my job before. We got a $4.99 super chat from John from a while back, and I'm sorry I forgot to put it up. Thank you, John.
I appreciate you, John. Is that a Jets? I guess that's a Jets intro picture. I don't remember them having lasers. Maybe that's a night game. But thank you, John. We appreciate you being here, and I'm happy to be back. Now, with the Carr thing too, it's like you look at his teams over the last couple of years where he had to deal with Gruden, like his receivers were. What's his name? Some Roberts and Henry Ruggs who got into that whole, drunk driving thing and killed somebody, whatever. He's in jail. Like his team has been so bad around him for multiple years. His offensive line's trash. His defense, I think, has never been above 21st in the league since he's been in the league. And you start looking at stats, if you want to get into that, his record, if his defense only holds a team to like under 2 touchdowns or 2 touchdowns or less, his record goes astonishingly up. So you put him on a team that's a top 5 to 10 defense with hopefully an improving offensive line and some talent around him. Yeah, I know he didn't have a great year this year. Waller was hurt for a lot of the year. You had Hunter Renfrow, who was hurt for a lot of the year. So you put him with a coach who doesn't try to fit a system to him. They obviously have problems. And Devontae Adams, but with a shit offensive line. So you have a solid running back and a number 1 receiver. Great. And even if it is okay, like Carr had some issues, it's an outlier to what was an 8 or 9 year career, which he was very solid. And I'm not saying he's great. I'm not saying he's Joe Burrow, but he's a top 10 to 15 guy. And yeah, he had some down games this year. He had some down games late. He got benched, but that's because they weren't trying to get him injured and have the contract guaranteed. So because you watched a game or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or even 10 of Derek Carr does not mean you know who he is. So we got to chill on saying Derek Carr is a terrible quarterback. Now, yeah, would I want a guy, Zach Wilson, to be top 5, top 10, the guy we drafted? Sure. But we have Derek Carr this year, Kyle. How many games do we win easily? I'm not talking about the games do we maybe win. What games do we win if Derek Carr? Let's put him on the lower end of the spectrum.
Can we pull up the schedule? Because I don't want to just shoot off.
Sure. Go ahead. I have to get to the top of my mind, but like on the lower end of the spectrum, Kyle, he's a bad signing, not a bad signing, like a terrible signing for the Jets this year. Let's say he's even disappointing. I expect him to be top 12 to 15 signs with the Jets. That's what he's been throughout his career. He's 31 years old, doesn't get injured. He's missed like 2 games in his entire career. Let's say he's a little bit disappointing and he falls to 16th through 18th. He's a little bit of a down year, a little bit below average, but still pretty solid for the Jets. Again, we'll pull up the schedule right now, but do you lose either one of those Patriots games?
Yeah, I think both those are wins.
Absolutely, unequivocally not. Do you lose that Dolphins game? And we're assuming health here. Do we lose that Dolphins game last week of the season?
I'm going to say no. I think you win it, but granted, a big problem with that game was, offensive line and blocking. And honestly, I know we're going to get to Mike LaFleur, but I think a lot of that blame goes on him for that game too. I mean, some of the run designs in that game, it would not work against some of those fronts. I mean, Miami ran a lot of odd fronts and, he still just, decided to run into those fronts. And it's just the blocking angles are really bad in that game. So it's possible you could lose that game too. Earlier in the season, do you win the Ravens game? 24-9, but so much of it was the offense was really bad. I don't think you win the Bengals game. Let's see. The Vikings game, do you win that one? Mike White played, I think, good enough for you to win that one.
Nope.
The Lions game, you definitely win the Lions game. So you're talking,
3 or 4 wins.
Three or four more wins, yeah.
If you're big on the optimistic side, you say 4 wins, even 3 wins. We're talking about a 10-win team who's in the playoffs right now. If you have Derek Carr, so and I see that Carr stopped. Pats played good versus good teams. We lost to the Pats. 9-3 because of a punt return at the end of the game. Zach Wilson was dreadful in that game. You put a decent quarterback in that game and we win that game. So whatever you want to say, you're talking about the Pats game. Did you watch the first Pats game, Jets game, which I'm not going to highlight your things, it's not on here. Did you watch the first game? Because Derek Carr does not throw those 3 interceptions that Zach Wilson throws and we win that game most likely. The Lions game was brutal. He had a couple big plays, but still not a good game from Zach Wilson. So I'm going to give him at least 3 wins. We're in the playoffs. So, and listen, if Carr is signed, I'm going to have 2 seasons of film review on him at the minimum. It's going to be 6 to 8 hours. So we can discuss it then. But I think too many people are hearing narratives about people, and people tend to fall into narratives because it's the easy thing to do. And I think that some people maybe have watched a game or 2 of him this year and have been disappointed. And then I think a person or 2 has seen the 0-7 record under 41 degrees, whatever it is, and kind of taken it out of context. You're talking about 7 games and how many years of a career. And you'd hope that, okay, he comes to practice with the Jets. He's in the cold weather. Maybe he adjusted a little bit more. And you look at some of the teams he played when he was playing those teams in cold weather. There's some good ass teams he was playing. So yeah, a little bit disappointing. It's 7 games in a 9-year career. Like that's what we're going to hitch our wagon to is 7 games. So the Carr hate is ridiculous. Again, I was almost expecting, I was almost expecting to be a little bit more disappointed than I was watching him the first 4 weeks of 2021. I was like, dude, he's fucking good. Like I would do a lot for Derek Carr.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, I know Scott Mason had a guy on who does film. And by the way, shout out to, I believe it's Darian Morris, who said, I hope he goes to y'all. He's a dog. He's our greatest QB in Raider history. I know there's a lot of Raiders fans. I mean, listen, and I saw this one Raiders guy on Twitter say something along the lines of he basically resuscitated our franchise from the depths of hell. I mean, the Raiders after that Super Bowl appearance, in the early 2000s, what was it, 2002, when they got blasted by the Buccaneers, the Raiders were god awful for the next decade plus. I mean, you're talking bottom of the barrel, year in, year out.
And
And
they still
Derek
were
Carr
even
is
the roster around Carr was still bad. Like look at even their draft picks, look Ruggs and Leatherwood and Jonathan Abram. Like they're not a great
those
franchise.
Mayock drafts were awful.
Yeah.
I mean, they did the GM before Mayock. I mean, like Khalil Mack, and they had a pretty good offensive line. He,
Cooper.
I think, and he obviously drafted Carr.
Mhm.
So I think he probably was a little bit better in that regard. But Carr, I'm not going to act like he's I would definitely say above average, but could I label him as good? Like you said, 10 to 15, like on a really, really, really good year for him with a really good offensive scheme and things around him. Everything's clicking. He's healthy. He could maybe scrape like top 10 conversation. But the point is like, you can win with that. Like now, granted, are we sure about the Jets coaching? No, we're not. Do the Jets have holes in the roster? Yes, they do. But the thing is like, Joe Flacco won a Super Bowl in 2012. Never was, like a goodish quarterback. He was always like average-ish, even when he was great, when in his best years.
Yeah.
So but the thing is you can win with Carr. But when we saw how putrid Zach Wilson was, when we saw, and by the way, Zach Wilson was worse than Sam Darnold. When we saw how bad Sam Darnold was, like when you're that bad week in, week out, when you can't hit routine passes, when you can't see safety spinning down into coverage, right? I mean, Zach Wilson couldn't make the most basic throws, couldn't even hit a check down in the flat to just, keep the chains moving. It's a huge, huge, huge upgrade, and at least gives the Jets the chance to be competitive. But when you have quarterback play that's that bad as how it's been, you don't stand a chance. So, I mean, just because, what was he? I mean, this year he was the third best quarterback in the division. We were thinking that he was going to be the fourth best because we thought Russell Wilson would be better, but geez, God, he was awful this year. I think that's part of also the hate too, because like, Patrick Mahomes is what he is, and Derek Carr will never be that. Justin Herbert came in on the scene as a rookie and, just blew the doors off the league, and he's an ultra talent too. And Derek Carr will never be that either. So that's probably also part of the hate, but I mean, like he's solid. You can win with him, and he's reliable, right? Like, he's going to suit up week in, week out. I don't buy all this drama stuff that you're hearing. I never heard that for all these years. And like, another good point I've heard being made too. Some people think, oh, he can't handle the New York market. He can't handle the New York market. Like, dude, Raiders fans are brutal, man. Like, you got to win there too.
Yeah.
With the old
and the market
just
stuff,
win, baby. Yeah.
The market stuff, like it's you have a lot of pressure whether you're being in New York or you're playing for the Jaguars. It doesn't matter. Like, there's a lot of pressure everywhere. Like, I know our beat could be a little bit more abrasive or whatever, but like, and that's almost why this offseason, like, I am extremely discouraged with what the Jets are or what they were at the end of the season. But you add a quarterback to this team and get a little bit healthy, like that's the reason to be optimistic, is just how much a quarterback can make a difference. And again, like you said, like we've been playing with the last couple of years since we've really been like diehard Jets fans with absolutely just garbage quarterback play. And for people to say a quarterback who is at the minimum solid is now trash because he's not Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow, it's baffling to me.
Let's think about this, Joe. I mean, honestly, there have been overall worse franchises than us in the last 10 to 20 years. I mean, the Jets have won more playoff games than the Dallas Cowboys since 1997. But when we think about quarterback play, is it fair to say that over the last 2 decades or so, the Jets have had the worst quarterback play in the league? Like, the Jaguars were certainly in contention for that, but now they got Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, but they even had like Leftwich and Garrard before that. Like, they had some decent quarterbacks, you know.
Well, Leftwich was never good. Garrard had some solid years.
And Blake Bortles, which by the way, we'll talk about some of the OCs.
Garbage.
But his best year was with what's his name, Greg Olson. He threw
and
like
definitely better than
touchdowns and 7 picks that year. You know, like he was better than Zach Wilson. Like the Lions had Stafford.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say they were another team that's repeatedly bad, but yeah, I mean, you thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've had tons of bad quarterback years, but they had Tom Brady the past couple of years.
They had Winston. Winston's better than anything we've had in years.
Yeah,
you know, like I think it's, unless I'm forgetting something off the top of my head, which forgive me if I do, but we've had pretty easily the worst quarterback play in the last 2 decades.
The Bills have had a ton of bad quarterback play in the last 20 years, but now they got
Josh Allen erase it. Even though I think he's fallen out of elite category this year. I think before the season,
I think a lot of that.
Allen.
I think we're seeing. I think Dayball. I mean, like if you saw
Yeah.
Daniel Jones in this past game and just what he did this season, minimizing turnovers and stuff, I think Dayball's like huge in that regard, reducing turnovers and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
By
the way, Jets gang, Carr did not lose to the Pats. Come on, that was an amazing game. Carr led a comeback. He threw an amazing touchdown pass to Keelan Cole at the end of the game.
It's like, but like it's people think so black and white. Like, can you imagine Derek Carr in his career with, again, he's never had, I think, higher than the 21st ranked defense. Imagine this year. I don't know if the Jets were exactly ranked 4th, 5th, 6th. Let's say we're the 10th ranked defense next year. Can Derek Carr put up 20 points? Can you put up 20 points a game with Derek Carr? We win a lot of games this year or even next year with just 20 points. Like Derek Carr can do that. So yeah, he's not elite, but he's solid. And that's better than anything we've had in 2 decades. So to scoff at, again, mid-20s to high 20s touchdowns to half interceptions of those touchdowns and about 4,000 to almost 5,000 yards consistently that Derek Carr's put up in his career it is absurd. It really is absurd how much hate the guy gets. And I want to get to the chat in a little bit too.
And the thing about him
and
too,
people talk about
like you're not going to have to give up a ton to get him. I don't.
What do you give up for Carr? What is your general feeling?
I'm not giving up a first for him. I'm definitely not. No. I don't think you have to. Okay. Would you?
No, I don't think you have to. I think the 2 is the
highest. By the way, shout out to Ross Tucker. I think he made a good point. Yeah. Derek Carr has a no trade clause. If Derek Carr really wants to go to a certain team, why would he want to waive that no trade clause? He could just say, no, you guys already moved on from me. You're going to have to cut me. That way he can choose what team he wants to go to, and that team won't have to give up assets to get him.
Now, and with the Carr thing too, it's so interesting because and I want to talk about your quarterback tiers. I guess we'll do that too. I want to get to the chat too. We're going to be so far behind. But with the Carr thing, do you want to guarantee that he comes to the Jets? I don't think if they give up a first round pick for that. And people talk about, oh, well, he's going to get cut and you don't want to trade for him because he might get cut and his contract is too big. But what does Derek Carr get in the open market, Kyle? Because I think this year he's owed 35 million
for sure. He's definitely making in the 40s per year.
Let's even be low and say, okay, it's $38 million. People talk about Derek Carr like, oh, he's making 35 this year, whatever it is next year, 41 and 43 the year after that. Like, it's an average of about $39 to $40 million a year. And like, oh, that's too much for Carr. What do you think he's going to get in the open market? So you're guaranteeing him with a second round pick and you get him for the next couple of years. Like people think, oh, he's going to sign for $30 million. He's not signing for $30 million anywhere unless he really wants to give the team a big break.
I was telling I have a decent amount of students that are Giants fans, and I was telling them, 3 weeks ago or whatever it was when they clinched a playoff spot, I was like, guys, I'm telling you right now, Daniel Jones is going to command 40-something million dollars a year. And they're like, no, we could get him for like low 30 or something. I was like, not happening, guys. You drafted him 6th overall. He brought you to the playoffs for the first time in years. He's going to want big time money. He's young. He's coming off the best year of his career. He's going to want big time money. Thing is, Derek Carr, 32 or whatever he is, that's still pretty young for a quarterback. I think he has much more, like, granted, like you could say Daniel Jones maybe has a higher upside, but Carr, what he is. He's more of a sure thing. This could be a fluke year for Daniel Jones.
He's done a lot more with worse than Daniel Jones has.
Yeah. So like he's going to command. Listen, some of these guys are making quarterback salaries constantly skyrocket. Some of these guys are already making in the 50s. If Russell Wilson is currently making in the 50s, Derek Carr is going to make at least in the 40s.
And even if it's like, okay, we're going to go to the low end and say he makes $37 million a year. Okay, so the $37 million a year he's going to make versus maybe the 39 average you get him for the next 3 years. Like we're gonna bitch about $2 million a year difference. Like you're not getting him for as cheap as people think he is. So if they give up a second round pick, I'm not going to lose my shit about it. Now, would I ideally say, okay, yeah, you don't trade for him. He takes a $37 million a year, even $40 million a year contract with the Jets, 3 years, $120 million, wherever it's going to be. And I get that's the most ideal outcome, but people talking about him like there's no way you can trade for him. His contract is too high. It's just you're living in Looney Tune land. Like he's gonna get a lot of money. Now I don't know who the primary contenders are for him. We've heard that the Commanders are gonna roll with Howell. Obviously, I'm not gonna buy that necessarily. Are the Colts gonna go with another retread quarterback? I think that he's a lot different than a Wentz. I think he's proven a lot more than Wentz has in his career. He's different than Matt Ryan. He's a lot younger than Matt Ryan. He's a lot different than Phillip Rivers. So I don't think it necessarily falls into the same category as those three guys. But do they do it? Do the Panthers do it? Do the Saints do it? I know they have a lot of contract or troubles with their contracts and stuff like that. But it's gonna be really interesting to see. And it's like in an ideal world, and we'll get into our quarterback tiers and all that stuff. Like just in a vacuum, would you rather have Aaron Rodgers for 2-3 years than Carr? Yes.
Mhm.
Could Carr be the longer term answer than Rodgers? So you might want him over him? 100%. Could you want Lamar Jackson over Carr? 100%. Does Lamar Jackson's PCL need complete reconstruction? I don't know. He said he's been injured, so that's a question. But the problem with that is you miss out on Carr. I don't know. We're gonna let him hit free agency, all this stuff. We're not gonna have trade assets, whatever it may be. We don't want him. He's trash. You don't land Carr. Rodgers stays with the Packers. Lamar Jackson stays with the Ravens. What are we doing, Kyle? Because those are my 3 guys. Give me one of those 3 guys. I'll obviously we have to figure out contracts, to figure out PCLs and knees and all that shit. But past that, and I have a tier. I almost have tiers of quarterback. Carr is my number 1 right now. Now you tell me Lamar Jackson is healthy, all that stuff. Okay, he's my number 1. Whatever.
You'd have to give up multiple first-round picks to get Lamar Jackson.
You're giving up 2, 3-round draft picks with players, with all that stuff. So Carr. And not just because not that he's a better player than Lamar Jackson. It's almost because of you get to figure out a lot earlier. But Carr is my number 1 right now. And then Lamar Jackson, Rodgers like my 2 and 3 again. Even though those guys may be better, regardless, they're all like a similar lump of one of those 3 guys. I'm very, very happy. So I'm assuming they'll do some research into Lamar Jackson's knee. But regardless, you give up 3 first-round draft picks for Lamar Jackson. He is what he was in his first couple of years. I'm happier than a pig and shit. Like great. Or sucks. Yeah, we don't have draft picks to talk about, but it's Lamar Jackson. Like we'll figure it out. Past that, Kyle, is there any guys and I have like 2 guys who I'll be very, very, very lukewarm with, but is there anybody you're going to be okay with past those guys? 2, 3, 4, 5. Like what do you do past those guys? Because again, Carr sucks. Okay. He goes to the Colts. He goes to the Commanders. He goes to the Saints. Wherever he goes, Lamar Jackson stays. Aaron Rodgers goes. The Jets are standing there, for lack of a better term, with their dick in their hand. What are they doing past those guys?
Okay, so I saw that. So I'm pretty sure that one of the guys that you're talking about lukewarm is Jimmy G. I really don't have much interest in Jimmy G. Is Jimmy G an upgrade? He absolutely certainly is. But the injury factor, and I think that Jimmy G, the upside isn't there as well. You want to talk about pure arm talent? Jimmy G's got the quick release, but other than that, I mean, Derek Carr can really make all the throws. I don't think that Jimmy G can. Derek Carr can play a little conservative.
He's more. He moves a lot better than I thought he did.
Yeah. Yeah. He's had, even in some of the games where we played him too, he's had some nice plays with his legs. Jimmy G. I think one of the knocks on Derek Carr, especially earlier in his career, is he could be a little bit conservative, even though he could make all the downfield throws. I think Jimmy G even suffers from the conservatism even a little bit more than Carr. So I'm not really interested in him for a variety of reasons. I didn't even like him that much when, there was a lot of hype with him with the Patriots when, he won a couple games as a backup in the Deflategate year where he had a substitute for Brady. Then he ultimately, he was traded for a 2nd-round pick. I was just like, I'm not so sure about it.
And to interrupt you before you go into other options too, and I have to study him more, obviously, to really feel how I like, or just to solidify how I feel about him. But he's in one of the easiest offenses in the league. Like you dump it off to Deebo Samuel or Kittle, and it's all yak and all that. Like he is in a very easy offense.
There's a reason why Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, is having the numbers he's having.
And give him his credit too. But
but it's a lot easier. Like, listen, if you put, if you put Mike White in that offense right now, what kind of numbers is he going to put up?
Yeah, and
notice I said Mike White, not Zach Wilson.
And I think that Purdy has as much touchdowns in one postseason game than Jimmy G has in his entire time with the Niners. I could be wrong. I think it's somewhere close to that. But Jimmy G is very lukewarm. And Kyle, the other guy, who you're going to be surprised I'm even saying him, it's the only thing that, and with this, I'll follow it up with this. Tannehill, I would understand it. I don't like Tannehill. Trust me, Kyle knows that. I do not like him. I think he's way overrated. I think he's always been overrated. But past that, like Gardner Minshew, Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, like all these guys, I would have serious problems if we walk into 2022 or 2023 and Jacoby Brissett's or Gardner Minshew's our starter. And with Gardner Minshew or Tannehill, and again, I'm very early in these opinions. I have to solidify them with watching these guys and just draft in general. I'll be very lukewarm with Jimmy G suiting up. I'll be like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, okay, I guess it's better than Zach Wilson, but like, dude, he's going to get injured. Like all this shit. He's in a great offense. He might not be anything with the Jets. Tannehill, same thing. With that being said, if you draft one, or if you sign one of those guys because you miss out on Carr because he's trash, apparently, you have to draft the quarterback in the top 3 rounds with one of those guys and hope to develop them for a year or two. But because if you just walk in with one of those guys and Zach Wilson, like I really don't have a lot of hope, but at least you give me like a second round guy. Okay, maybe he can develop for a year or two, whatever. But
Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are both kind of on the hot seat. They can't afford to draft a second or third round quarterback and wait for him to develop. It's just not an option.
And it's not even realistic. Like, and I know I'm living in Looney Tune land, but even it past Jackson, Rodgers, and this is maybe my fandom speaking more than like my brain. But it's like you don't get one of those guys. Like I'm almost willing to trade up to frickin' the top 5 pick and get one of the top 3 quarterbacks and just hope those guys work out. Because like what is Tannehill? What is Jimmy G? Like they're nothing. So past those 3 guys, I don't know if I really even feel like that.
I have to quibble with you on Tannehill. The reasons why I would still be higher on him than I am. The reason I'd still be higher on Carr than Tannehill is because let me just say this about Tannehill. If you look at Tannehill had really shitty offensive lines his first several years in the league. His first year was 2012. Miami, what was Joe Philbin, I believe, was the coach at the time, if I'm not mistaken. So for years, Tannehill had really bad offensive lines, didn't have too much in the receiver department. He stepped in from day one as a starter, played pretty damn well. Look at his numbers. His best year with the Dolphins came with Adam Gase his first year. His last couple of years with Adam Gase, 34 now. Okay, he's like 2 years older than Carr. I'm just saying, like, if you look, that's one of the things about him. He didn't miss any games for a long time. It wasn't like until like 5 or 6 years in the league where he missed his first game. Now the past couple of seasons, like he had the he had the knee injury, right? Late in that first year with Adam Gase. Then he had the shoulder injury, I think his last year with Adam Gase. This year with the Titans, I forget what his injury was. So he has started to show that, okay, he's a little bit more injury prone than Derek Carr. And as you said before, the age. The other thing to consider is Tannehill doesn't really seem like he's going to get cut. So you'd probably definitely it seems like you'd have to trade for him, where maybe the trade is not necessarily an option for Carr. It seems like maybe you'd have to give up more for Tannehill. But I'm just saying, just as a starter, when they're on the field, I don't think you can say that Carr is better than Tannehill. I don't agree. And again, this is very like not generic's not the best word, but just based on me watching them and broadcasting, even like the little bit of film I've watched on us playing Tannehill with the Titans or us playing the Dolphins with Tannehill. I think, and you obviously feel differently. I think Carr is more in that 12 to 15 range, where I feel like Tannehill is more like that 18 to 21, 22 range. No. And I think with Tannehill, part of the draw with him, let's say a couple of years ago, is his athleticism, and now he's getting injured. He's 34 years old. I'm not as high on Tannehill as you are, obviously. I mean, we could agree to get. But do you think that Tannehill is not a good thrower of the football? Because I'm telling you, man, that guy's got really good. I just think he makes some dumb ass mistakes in terms of just chucking balls up there. Like one of the last playoff games he was in. And again, this is just one game, but it kind of I've seen throughout his career, like how many throw like 4 picks in a playoff game. Talk about the Bengals game last year, and they were terrible picks. That was a bad game. With the Titans, was a bad game. I'm not saying he has a great team around him necessarily, but the defense has been pretty solid. He has a 2,000-ish yard, one of the better runners in the NFL the last couple of years. And Derrick Henry had AJ Brown. He had some good players around him, and he still shits the bed. Like I definitely prefer Carr over. He did make it. He did make it to an AFC Championship game with the Titans. Yeah, and the thing too with the Carr, and like by the way, all these guys like, oh, you can't win a Super Bowl with Carr. Carr is can we all agree here? There's 200 people in here, which I appreciate 200 people being in here in the offseason. But can we say that Carr is a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo? Jimmy Garoppolo, and I get that they had better coaching than the Jets, obviously, but he was in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. Like, you can't win with Carr now because he's been on a shitty ass Raiders team for his entire career. We can't win with him. Like it's ridiculous, some of the narratives around that guy. But with that being said, again, moving past Tannehill, which again I'd be very, very lukewarm on him or Jimmy G, who are both, I feel like both are in that lower tier of quarterbacks you really want starting for your team. Lamar Jackson, like, what are your feelings on? And we'll get to Lamar Jackson. Can we talk about New York Bully super chat first, because it's been up for a little while. All right, so New York Bully says, I don't see Lamar coming to us. I think he'll be tagged or traded to Atlanta or Carolina. Aaron Rodgers is in the end of his prime, but I still think he can play at an exceptional level for 2 more years. Well, I definitely agree with the second part. Absolutely. That's the problem with Aaron Rodgers is such kind of like a unique guy that marches to the beat of his own drum. He could get traded to a team play awesome for that year, lose a heartbreaking playoff game, and say, you know what? Hey, you know what, guys? I'm going to retire. I just want to do something else with my life. And I don't think he'd feel any shame in it. I don't think he'd feel bad about it. Like, he's kind of his own dude.
He kind of came out and said, like, if the Packers are planning on rebuilding, then, I don't want to necessarily be there. So it seems like there's a pretty good chance he plays somewhere else. Now, how much do we have to, the contract situation? I have no idea. Cause I think if they trade him this year, it's like 29 million dead. And then next year it's like 30 something million dead or whatever it is. But can we get him over the Raiders or the Bucks or whoever's going to want to trade for Aaron Rodgers? Well, I don't give a shit.
Dude can still ball, man. He can ball. Like, even that game we played him in, and I know that they really struggled on offense that game. He still made some ridiculous throws in that game. And I'm just saying, like, dude, any game you put on, that dude is making ridiculous throws every game. So
where's your feeling on where he is? Like, I don't think he's not top 5 MVP level anymore, but what is he, 5 through 10 quarterback in the league?
He's definitely a top 10 quarterback. There's no doubt about it.
Exactly. Like, now what is a contract? All that stuff we get to trade for him, probably at least a first round pick and maybe a little bit more. And I think they can work out the contract stuff, but I think,
can't see how you could give up multiple first rounders for a guy who could only be there for a year or two. I can't see how you could justify that.
But you're talking about top 5 to 10 quarterback on the Jets with what we have. And like, that's the only reason I'd be interested in Nathaniel Hackett, which we'll get into some of those guys, but I'm not really
Aaron Rodgers loves him.
So, but nonetheless, like, he's one of my top 3 options. And again, like, I think the stuff, I don't know if you heard him on the Pat McAfee show. He's like, oh, I could still play at an MVP level. And then because Gronkowski came out, I was like, why can't you talk about you being like, he just talked about himself individually. He's still that good. Like, I think people are blowing that up way too much.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things. And listen, Rob Gronkowski, he's a national treasure and he's an all-time great tight end. But he's
not everybody who's retired needs a mic.
He's not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed.
No.
But so I think that's kind of one of those things where Gronkowski kind of like saw the quote and then decided to like have his own quote type of thing or whatever. Didn't really listen to the whole context of what he was saying or didn't really care what the context was. But clearly, if you listen to it, they're kind of like talking about what Rodgers' ability is. We did get another super chat from Anthony for $4.99. Thank you. Or excuse me, John, not Anthony. John says, my last resorts are Andy Dalton. Oh God, no, I'm not interested in that. Anthony
not the joke about it, but the joke about it. John, do you know how to tie a noose? That's my response to Andy Dalton, Anthony Richardson, or Mike White.
I mean, Andy Dalton, you could almost maybe get excited for it if he was just leaving Cincinnati, but he's been with several teams since then. No. So he was with Dallas, the Bears, and where was he this year? The Saints. And listen, granted, like, he's been fine as a backup, like he's a backup.
You're not the Jets and Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh or their jobs are on the line this year. They are not going with Andy Dalton. There's absolutely no way. Now with Rodgers, and again, I almost want you to like tier make them, and I know there's a lot of stipulations in each tier of these guys, like 1, 2, 3.
We did get another super chat. Speed Doctor 199. Get car draft AR-15. Sit him 2 years. So that's Anthony Richardson, the Florida quarterback. So couldn't say much about him. Haven't watched him yet, but
the only thing I'll say to this is Carr is a lot longer term. Like why can't Carr be the option for the next 6-7 years with the Jets? He's 31 years old. It's not like Aaron Rodgers, where I agree he's going to be higher level play than Carr for 2 years, most likely. But I would definitely want to draft a quarterback with that. Now with Carr, why are we assuming that he's going to be gone in 3-4 years? Like, he could be here for 5, 6, 7 years. So while, if they love Anthony Richardson, he's there, fine. But I would say that almost with a team with the Jets, who obviously they struck out on Zach Wilson. Are they really going to invest a lot of money into Carr and then draft a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round? Like, they need linebackers, they need safety. So I don't see it as a realistic option, to be honest. If you get Carr to draft another quarterback. Now, if you get Rodgers or one of those guys, maybe a little bit different. But next super chat, Alex. I don't want Zach back on the team next year, but if he's back because JD or Woody insists on it, then it cannot be more than a developmental.
He's going to be back just for the sake of the contract. He's going to be back.
I suck with contracts. If you could trade him with something else and another team is like, let's say Carr. This is the Raiders. You give them a 2nd or a 3rd and Zach Wilson. But I don't know how that contract works out with that. Okay, fine. I don't need him back. But I think based on his contract, again, speaking from a very I'm uneducated on how a lot of contracts work in terms of like trading them. If you could trade him, fine, cool with it. But yeah, you don't want him as your QB2 next year. You need him to be QB3. I think you don't want Zach Wilson stepping in for if you're in a playoff run, right? Which
absolutely
is
not
a fall from grace. Talking about a QB2 in the draft, top. The the consensus number 2 quarterback in the draft. Let's not
rewrite
be
history.
mistaken here. Exactly. From that to not being a QB2 is quite an issue. But like, it's so interesting with the Jets and where they are right now, because can you hire an OC right now without knowing who the quarterback is? What if you get, let's say, okay, the Jets are gung ho on getting Carr. They sign Greg Olsen, and then you get Lamar Jackson, and he's no history in terms of like running that type of offense, or they don't fit. So do you get the quarterback, then the OC? Do you get the OC, then the quarterback? We have so much stuff to talk about.
Very good. Very interesting questions.
By
the way, shout out to Cool Your Jets. I haven't listened to them yet, but I know that they've put out, I believe it's at least 5 different episodes on various 5 or 6 offensive coordinator options. Have you listened to them yet?
I've listened to the one they released today, which was on Brady. I forget his first name is, from the Colts, who got fired. Nani recommended it. And then I listened to, I forget. Maybe it's the Eagles quarterback coach. His name, is it Brian Johnson? Is that his name? No,
I can't say off the top of my head.
Yeah, I have a list of candidates. We'll talk about them in a little bit as well. John, $2 super chat. I said last resort a little bit. Dalton had a good.
He did, and he did capitalize last. He did.
I get it. I get last resort, John, but over Dalton. God, like this is brutal, man. Like I rather have Brissett. I rather have Bridgewater.
Listen, Joe Douglas has nailed some big trades in his relatively young tenure as a GM already. Dude, he's been the GM and he's had 3 drafts with this team now. He is coming. Listen, 3 drafts and multiple free agency periods. He's at the point, and I know he got the 6-year contract. He's at the point where wins are starting to be factored into his longevity here.
Mm-hmm.
He knows there's pressure on him. He's not going to go into a season saying, "Oh yeah, Andy Dalton's going to be our starter going forward." He will swing a trade.
There's no way
for one of these guys, right? His job's on the line. He's not going to. You can't. Oh, I'm gonna. Listen,
I'm
Andy
resting
Dalton,
my career
if
on
he's
Andy
your starter,
Dalton.
If Andy Dalton, you're gearing for a 6-7 win season right there.
Yeah, there's no way they're gonna
and that would be good if you could get 6-7 wins with a guy like that.
Joe Douglas is so interesting. Like it's not gonna happen. Dalton is not your opening day. So there's absolutely no way. He's just so interesting because I love him in trades. I love him for the most part in some contracts. I love him in the draft, but his free agency has been bad, man. It's been bad. Now some of the signings we like, Conklin we like, but like even last year, Kyle, like we didn't love Uzama for the price, right? We didn't love Tomlinson for the price. We did not love Whitehead for the price. So there's a lot of guys who are, and even Lawson, like we love Lawson what he was with the Bengals, but we also said kind of a stipulation. I don't know if stipulation is the right word, but a factor into that was $15 million, but he's been injured a little bit. And obviously that reared his ugly head. So that was something that he had to consider when signing him. It's not like he was completely healthy and then got injured. So his free agency has sucked. So hopefully he improves. Now, does he kind of, I don't know if save face is the right terminology, but can he admit some of his mistakes? And is Barrios on the team next year? If Barrios on the team, that's an indictment on him.
Poor asset management if he's on the team.
He cannot make I don't care. I know it's like $2 million dead, $3 million dead for Barrios. You save $5 million. Even if it's just $5 million and okay, $3 million dead is what it is. Can you find a better part returner than Braxton Barrios for $5 million or a better backup slot gadget guy than Braxton Barrios for $5 million? You can. Whitehead, I don't have a strong feeling whether he'd be cut or not. In my opinion, can you find a better guy than him? Let's say I don't know how injured Jimmy Ward's been.
You don't have a strong opinion about Whitehead getting cut?
I don't know who's in. That's with me factoring in. I don't know who's in free agency. I don't know the safeties in free agency. I haven't watched their film. And obviously, there's a lot of thought into that. Or like,
with the way he played last year, and just, and I'm not saying that you could draft a guy in a later round. And when I say later, I'm even saying like mid, early.
Could Tony Adams?
I'm not saying first.
Could Tony Adams be good? Better than I don't know if you watch a film of the Dolphins game, but he's pretty impressive.
It's exactly. And he had a couple plays. He started to play a little bit later in the season too. I remember there was like I believe he played in that Lions game, and I'm pretty sure I called him out in a play or two when I was at the stadium with Scott watching that game. There was a couple plays. I think he had a nice pass deflection in the Bills game, if I'm not mistaken. One of those late season games. He might have had one against the Seahawks. Like there was a couple moments, and it's like, okay, Tony Adams, I'm paying him pennies versus $7.5 million a year for Jordan Whitehead. It's like you almost bank like, okay, there could be more upside there, and it's also just a better, use of resources. So, I mean, if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm not interested in bringing him back. I don't
Yeah,
think
and
he's
like,
gonna.
could you
Go
get a
ahead.
Jimmy Ward for? And I don't know what his injury history is, but like, he's 31-32, but a stopgap guy. Like, at the end of the day, do I want it to be I don't know, Jesse Bates and Jordan Poyer next year? Sure, I would love that, but at the same time, I acknowledge that we already had a top 5 to 10 defense, and if you plug a few holes, multiple
They need to put
safeties,
more
maybe a
on offense.
linebacker, they need more on offense than they do on defense. You can still be like, let's say there's starters next year at safety, or a second round safety and a mid Jimmy Ward. It's better than what we had this year, and then you re-sign Quincy and you
Joyner was
sign like,
awesome.
and like it's not even like linebackers make a lot. Like, let's say and again, I don't know who's a free agent, but like Nicholas Morrow, who we wanted last year. I think he's on the Bears this year. But like a Morrow, Quincy Williams, and Mosley restructured a second round safety, and Jimmy Ward. Like, we can still be a pretty solid defense. Now, obviously, it's not going to be great in the middle necessarily, but I still think we can be top 10-ish. A lot of the assets the Jets have are going to go to offensive line. And again, we have a lot of time to get into this shit, but like, I think the offensive line depends on what Dwayne Brown wants to do. Becton is not walking in as an opening day starter, but I think with the offensive line at the minimum, they're most, in my opinion, Tomlinson's back, unless you can figure out a way to get out of that contract. I don't think you can. Tomlinson's back. I think McGovern is most likely back. ABT is your right guard. Dwayne Brown retires or not, maybe get out of that contract, but I think at the minimum, you have to sign a tackle, whether it be left tackle or right tackle, and then you go into the draft and you have Becton and Mitchell as backup tackle, swing tackle, whatever it may be, and you have to draft a guy in the first round or two at tackle as well. But I think you need at least a free agent signing at tackle position. And then what do they do at receiver? If they get rid of Barrios, who is your number 3? Who is your number 4? Do they get rid of Davis? And the thing with Davis is he's another interesting case because I think he's worth his contract when he plays. Yeah. But the problem is he hasn't been on the field a lot. So can you get an Alan Lazard?
You can bank on him missing about 4 games a year.
Exactly. So would you rather get rid of him for $10.5 million and pay Alan Lazard $8-9 million a year, or Jacoby Myers $8-10 million a year? Like, would you rather have one of those guys who are at least going to consistently be on the field? Because again, I think Davis is underrated by fans. And listen, I'm not saying he's good necessarily. I think he's a solid top 3 receiver on the team. He's a very good blocker. His drop problems weren't as big as people think they were this year. So I think he's a solid, starting receiver. But with that being said, he's not healthy all the time. So what do they do with him? Like, there's so much to do on offense that you're not going to splurge at safety or at linebacker, at least in my opinion. Another super chat, which we appreciate. A lot of super chats. This one, Brandon O'Dwyer. Free agency is so bad this year. Lawson and Davis would be near the top of their positions. They have some trade value. Why not explore that before a cut? Kyle, answer to this?
I don't think anyone's going to want Carl Lawson for that contract. Just being honest, what team would want to trade for him? The injury, there's an injury history there. Number one, comes to the Jets, he gets hurt again, and he just didn't really look like the same player. Who's going to want him for $15 million a year? Corey Davis, I could see there potentially being a market for him, but it's like, if you get rid of him again, like, what are you replacing him with? And whoever the quarterback's going to be, you do want him to have weapons. And trust me, Corey Davis, granted, we just said the injury problems for him is really the concern. When he's on the field, he's a solid player. I know the stats look awful this year, but you watch the film is better than the stats. There's no
when he's on the field, who is a better free agent right now than him? Like, I think the top 2 guys that people talk about are Lazard and Jacoby Myers. Are either one of those guys better than Corey Davis when on the field? I guess that's a big part of it. So that's going to be, again, interesting to see. Now with the OC thing too, and again, we have to still talk about Michael LaFleur getting fired and a lot of stuff, Kyle. But in general, another thought I have is a lot of these offenses take a year or 2 to adjust. Like Rodgers talked about adjusting to the LaFleur system. He wasn't great year 1, and then year 2, 3, 4.
No, he was good year 1.
He was not Rodgers. He was not Rodgers in those years. Like he had a little bit of
he had a big jump from what he was with McCarthy, man.
Okay, I could be misremembering, but I thought he was a little bit down in year 1, and then he really jumped like MVP
dude, they won 13 games, like I think every year those first 3 years he was with the Packers.
Okay, I'm gonna Google. I'm gonna look up the stats on that one and fact check you on that. Because I'm not sure if you're correct, but nonetheless, typically quarterbacks, if they're adjusting to a new scheme or even teams in general adjusting to a new scheme, it takes a year, right? We could say that generically. So do you have to marry a OC to a quarterback who's been in a very similar system, if not the exact system? Like that's another thing we have to think about with this, with the hire of an OC and with the signing of a quarterback. So there's so many like different layers into what the Jets do at QB and OC. So there's a lot to figure out. So is that something that's important to you? It's like, okay, well, if you get, Carr, can he fit Marcus Brady's system? Has he run Marcus Brady's system? Does he want to be in Marcus Brady's system?
It's a very good question. It's a very, very good question. Obviously, the quarterback is, just looking at what the salary is, how much they get paid, how much teams prioritize it. Obviously, the quarterback is, you'd have to say, more important than who the offensive coordinator is. There's no doubt about that.
100%.
But the thing is, it's easier to hire offensive coordinator, and that's going to happen sooner. So how do you make sure that, because you want to put the bigger priority on the quarterback, but you're not going to get your quarterback before you get your OC. So it's very difficult. I don't know that I have a good answer to it.
You go balls deep trying to get Aaron Rodgers, and you sign Hackett, and then Aaron Rodgers is gone, and Hackett's the new Adam Gase at OC. Like Hackett's kind of like, okay, yeah, he was great with Rodgers. What is he without Rodgers? No, not much. What was Adam Gase without?
Yeah, listen, Nathaniel Hackett, let's not forget, he was Doug Marone's offensive coordinator in Buffalo. They didn't have great offenses in Buffalo. They were okay. Like Doug Marone's last year in Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken, he went 9-7, but it was mostly on the back of that defense. Buffalo really started to have good defenses like around his last year. And then obviously since they've had McDermott, they've had good defenses. And then Hackett followed Marone down in Jacksonville. And again, what was really the strength of those Jacksonville teams? It was the defense, right? Yeah. Saxonville, if we remember, right? Calais Campbell and, all those ferocious monsters on the defensive line, and Ngakoue when he was at the prime of his career. Hackett's really only had great offenses when he was with Rodgers. So I get your point there.
That, and he wasn't even the primary offense. Like I don't know exactly how their system works.
Yeah,
it's not like he was under a defensive coach.
Exactly. It's a great point.
And with the OC, and we'll get into individual stuff. I'm not sure if we're gonna hit everything in the next hour or two, but with OC, regardless of the name, I'm at the point now where we've been so over at least the last couple of years, last decade or two, it's like new quarterback, new OC, hot new thing, all this stuff for the most part. To me, I can't speak for you. I am 100% in the camp of get an OC who's called plays before. I don't think the Jets could rely solid Joe Douglas on, we have another hot shot coordinator who's going to be coming up because they did the same shit with LaFleur. He didn't work out. So can you sign, Patullo or one of these guys who could be good? Like, wouldn't you rather have a guy who has, at least me, I would rather have a guy who has called plays, and we can go over the list. Let me pull up some of these guys, and some of the guys that they talked about, whether that be.
Do you want to bang out a couple of these super chats before we pull up that list?
Yeah, sorry. And I'm an hour behind the chat too, so to get to that, I apologize. There's been a lot of shit going on.
Let's prioritize those super chats. Give more incentive. All right. So Andrew says, "Cool your Jets pod about Marcus Brady. Hope to hear opinions." I didn't listen to that one yet, but Joe, you might have, right?
Yeah. I listened. I was driving, so to be fair, like maybe I should listen a little bit more. But and again, like I don't know the guy's name who was being interviewed. So I don't know his football knowledge. He sounded relatively knowledgeable, but he seems to be more short passes, RPO heavy. Apparently, a lot of the players, when he was scapegoated, a lot of the fans, the beat reporters, the players thought he was scapegoated as the OC. But apparently, a lot of the players really, really liked him. And he does a podcast with a former player or a current player, I forget what his name is, who also really, really liked him. So apparently, again, they thought he was scapegoated. A lot of the players liked him, and a lot of the guys who studied the team thought he was actually a pretty solid coordinator. And again, like regardless of who exactly we want, I think it's very, very important to have a guy with experience, whether that be Marcus Brady, Kyle, and we'll talk about again some of the guys individually maybe, but whether that be him, whether that be even like a Joe Brady, which we'll talk about, but Joe Brady has called plays, obviously with the Panthers and that failed, but at least he's called plays. He was the new
LSU.
He was the LSU guy who was talking about, we got rid of Gase or we hired Gase. Let's get Joe Brady. Is it him? To me, by the way,
just thinking about Joe Brady for a quick moment, like, he ends up being the scapegoat in Carolina, but then after he left, it got only worse with Matt Rule. And you start to think, well, maybe he wasn't the problem there.
Now, two of my top guys, like right now, and Bevel, I know declined the interview, which he also declined the Commanders. But my two guys are Greg Olsen, Todd Monken. I like Monken a lot.
Dude. Yes.
A lot. When they got to Adam Gase, apparently he was a runner-up. So I want Monken badly. Now, can you pay him as much as he's making at Georgia? Now, is it important to him money, or is it okay? I go to be an OC, I prove that I'm a good OC in the NFL, and I get a head coaching job. So is it money, or is it obviously the end goal of being an NFL head coach? Greg Olsen, you look at him, he most likely means Carr. And even with Greg Olsen, which again, I really got to study these guys individually. Say, okay, this is their weaknesses, this is what the third down tendencies, their red zone tendencies, all this shit. But Greg Olsen, you look at him, some of Carr's best years, Greg Olsen. You look at Jared Goff's best year with the Rams, Greg Olsen. You look at the year that Blake Bortles had when they thought he was going to be the franchise guy and threw, again, don't quote me, but like 27 touchdowns, 9 picks. Greg Olsen. So those are my top two guys right now, Todd Monken, Greg Olsen. Again, if Hackett means Rodgers, okay. But that's kind of my general feeling is one of those guys. And if not one of those guys, a guy who's called plays Blake before, Bortles, a Joe Brady.
Line like that's really impressive.
Yeah. A Joe Brady, a Marcus Brady. But that's my feeling now. Brady, Greg Olsen, Monken, top tier, number 1 and 2. Let's be fair. I'll be more transparent. Monken, easily number 1, the top guy I would want in a vacuum. And then I would say Greg Olsen, the step below him. I don't know if you have the same feel on those guys. Like, I don't want the Nick Caley, a fucking tight ends coach from the Patriots, and they signed a defensive coordinator to be their OC and Matt Patricia. I don't want to touch Nick Caley. Kevin Patullo, he could be great. All this bullshit, blah, 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 could be great. I don't give a fuck. He hasn't called plays before. I don't want him. I don't care how hotshot he is. Brian Johnson, the quarterback, I think he's a quarterback coach from the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if Brian Johnson, because he has familiarity, my calls are hitting a little bit, with a running quarterback or running type quarterback in a Jalen Hurts, does that translate to Lamar Jackson? Okay, you bring me Brian Johnson, Lamar Jackson, we're talking. But the same thing with Brian Johnson, with some of these other guys we talk about, like Hackett, like he didn't necessarily call the plays with the Packers. Brian Johnson is under an offensive coach, and he's not even the coordinator, right? He's the QB coach. So he's like 3 steps below what we really want. So really, to me, it's Olsen, Monken, top tier, and then the Brady's. I would say Marcus Brady before Joe Brady, but I really do not want to touch a guy who hasn't called plays with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, I mean, like, and again, there's always a lot of upside. Like, if you get a guy who hasn't called plays before, well, he could be a great play caller. He could have that really high upside. He just hasn't tapped his potential yet, but it is definitely a risk. And I don't think that Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh can really afford that level of risk. So just from that standpoint, it does make more sense to get a guy who has play calling experience. Those two names, Olsen and Monken, I really liked. I can't really comment on a lot of these guys in depth. I guess I will come to know more maybe by the next time we do a stream, we already have the coordinator. But anyway, Monken personally, and I if I were him, I wouldn't make the jump to be an NFL coordinator. Dude, you're at Georgia right now, killing it as a coordinator. That program is like another version of Alabama right now with the level of talent that they've been producing the past couple drafts. It almost you kind of think that, like, if he has another couple, good years at Georgia, eventually he could probably get a head coaching job in the NFL or in college football, which the pay is like just as good, if not better. And like, you could argue more job security, and it's easier to pick your own players and stuff. I don't know that it makes sense for him, even though he has NFL experience, to make the jump to be an NFL offensive coordinator.
Right at the beginning of that, there was a question I really, really, really wanted to ask you. Completely left my mind, but we'll get to Super Chat first. From Speed Doctor, Jets fans will get tired of Carr in 2 years. Lamar was thought to be the only running quarterback. Everyone is going to wish we drafted AR-15 and sat him. And what
I'm not opposed to drafting AR-15 in like the second round or whatever. I haven't watched any of him, so maybe I might be opposed.
Yeah, exactly.
But just on the surface of it, I'm not opposed to it. But like,
depends on who we bring in a quarterback. If it's Rodgers, okay, bring in AR-15. If it's Garoppolo, okay. If it's one of those guys, okay, like one of the shorter term options. But if it's Carr, No, I don't think Jets fans get tired of Carr. I think realistically, Carr comes in like, holy shit, we're seeing a quarterback who's actually, above average, and we're going to be infatuated with him because I haven't seen it in so long. And talk about the quarterbacks, and hopefully I remember the other question I want to talk to you. There's something to do with the offensive coordinators.
The thing, if I could just elaborate on the Carr point one more, because people really want to talk about that tonight, and justifiably so. I don't know about you, Joe, and I'm pretty sure you have the same feeling as me. So many times as my fierce fandom as a Jets fan, pretty much no matter what quarterback it was, I'm scared that every time they take a drop back, they're going to make a disastrous interception or something like that.
Yeah.
Whether it's Mark Sanchez, he was an interception king. He look at his stat line throughout his entire career. He's got more picks than he has touchdowns. All right. And that's unacceptable. I mean, listen, this is a guy who was playing in the 2009 to, in the 2010s, right? In modern football, that stat line is absolutely unacceptable. Now, some years he had better talent than others. Granted, a lot of the years he didn't, but still unacceptable. I mean, if we were just talking about Blake Bortles in any given year having a 27-9 stat line, but like, some of these quarterbacks, like we've just seen absolute dog shit performances at quarterback, like just absolute bottom of the barrel year in, year out at quarterback. There are certain given years where we had decent level of quarterback play. 2015, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Josh McCown, even though he missed like the last 5 games or whatever it was, and he was old as hell, but and he was on a really bad team, but he showed some competence there, and at least in terms of decision making and stuff. Granted, the talent wasn't there yet in the later stages of his career, and then these high draft picks, Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, who just can't get the job done. They just can't see the field right and things like that. You can't make the most simple routine plays. Carr can make the simple routine plays, get the chains moving, live to play another down, not make and granted, and listen, I know at the end of this year, Carr made some, mistakes that cost the team the game, but that's not who he is on a game-to-game basis. I think most Jets fans would really welcome just competent level quarterback play, because we haven't had anything close to that on a consistent basis.
And Carr, he's overcompetent. He's better than competent, truly. And I'll get to at least 2 more things before we get to the.
I think we do have one more super chat, another $10 one from Alex.
Awesome. We really appreciate the super chats, guys. Alex, can they pull off a Crowder with Corey where they kept him through the start of training camp, then say slash the salary in half? Or I think there's a realistic chance that Corey Davis could restructure, but the problem with that is the wide receiver market over the last couple of years. Can he not get $10 million in free agency, Kyle? So I think it's a possibility, but I'm not going to say it's a strong possibility that he restructures. I think he can go to the open market and get 2 years, $20 million. So it's hard. Like, do you cut him and then hope you get a Lazard or a Jacoby Myers? What if they sign elsewhere? Then you're stuck with who? Like your top 2 or Garrett Wilson and Elijah Moore, which I'm higher on Elijah Moore than most others are, and not in terms of what he does off the field and the shit he likes, and talking about Bills receivers and Miami receivers on Twitter consistently and praising them, which is just not a good look for a Jets guy. Nonetheless, I'm higher on him going to next year as a starting receiver, but you don't have Davis. You miss out on Lazard or Jacoby Myers, and who is your 3, 4, 5, 6 next year? Like it would be a bad crop of receivers. So you don't just cut him to cut him. I think you have to replace him, then you cut him. But I don't think – I would hope he restructures, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee just because of what the market is nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't studied Alan Lazard in super detail, and I don't think you have either, and I don't think that most people here have either, but he's very big. He's very big. He's like, what, 6'5", 230 something? Very big, but I don't know, man. Like, I'm not super impressed by his play. Like, I feel like Corey Davis is a better all-around receiver. Yeah. So Lazard might be a little younger and maybe doesn't have the injury worries or whatever, but I'm not. Jacoby Myers is interesting. He's a flawed player. He's not as a receiver, he's not the most skilled player in the world, but he's a very good blocker. He gives you some yak ability. I think he's a smart player, knows where to go, where to sit down in zone coverage and things like that. You could run some trick plays with him, throw the football with him if you wanted to. He's interesting, but again, is he a better all-around receiver than Corey Davis? I don't think he is either. So do you want to move on from Corey Davis for guys like that?
But would you rather have a player who, let's say it's Lazard or Meyer, who might be obviously a little bit, let's say, worse than Corey Davis in terms of their on-the-field play, but who are going to be healthy for 15, 16 games a year. Like, is that consistency key for the Jets? So that's what I would argue. While I would prefer him to those guys in terms of the
thing is,
on the field play.
But here's the difference, though. You go and get one of those guys, you're going to have to give them more guaranteed money, which is going to hang. Well, granted, if you're Saleh or Douglas, especially if you're, I guess, Douglas, the GM, like you're worried more about the immediate than the future. So you might not be so concerned with that. But it's like, just from like building a team standpoint, it almost makes more sense to hold on to Corey Davis and his contract because, his guaranteed money, I believe, is already all paid. So,
so we talked about Aaron Rodgers.
We did get one more.
Jeez. All right. No, listen, I appreciate it. It's not like, oh, damn it, we got another super chat. Marvin Guns one. We appreciate it. $10 super chat, $9.99. Tom, no. One, as a Jets fan, I don't want to see Tom Brady in a Jets uniform. I'm not going to say I would not go to games, stuff like that, because I'll be bullshitting you. With that being said, Tom Brady has declined. It's not Tom Brady coming from the Pats where, he might have a year or two. He's going to be 46 years old, if I'm not mistaken. And if you watch him recently, if he has a very clean pocket, fine. He'll hit his guys. He's still as smart as he ever was. If he has to move a centimeter, he just looks washed. He cannot move at all. And Tom Brady, in his heyday, not a mobile quarterback, he was very, very, very good at moving the pocket. He can't do it the same way that he used to. So Tom Brady is washed. I'm not going to say he's terrible. I still think he could be an average-ish level quarterback, but I'm not, absolutely no way Tom Brady with Gronk. And at this, again, Gronk hasn't played in a year now. Is he really that much better? Like, we're going to bury Ruckert. And Ruckert looked good, by the way, as a blocker.
He was a man on a mission blocking in that Dolphins game.
So hopefully he
elevates himself. By the way, that does make you question the coaching staff a little bit. Why was this guy sitting the bench, not even dressing up the vast majority of the season, right? Like, you drafted him in the 3rd round. Granted, it was at the end of the 3rd round. He was a compensatory pick, if I'm not mistaken. But he had a drop in Cleveland. That was week 2. All right. Yes, you paid premium ass. Why is Kenny, and I get maybe Kenny Yeboah is better on special teams. Why is Kenny Yeboah playing over Ruckert? Why?
Yeah.
That's when I was seeing some of those blocks and something I wondered, I was like, wow, is Ruckert really that bad in practice? Like, why are they not playing him?
Mm-hmm. Now again, I don't need to one or two more things before we get to the chat, which we are so. Do we have another super chat? I think we just got another. Another $10 one.
There we go.
I don't know if people are doing it on purpose now, but go ahead, pull it up.
I'm trying. It's why don't you pull it up? It's not letting me pull it up for some reason.
I am an hour behind in the chat, so I cannot scroll down all the way.
I could see it, but it's not letting me pull it on the screen for some strange reason.
I'll scroll down. Let's see.
I got it now. Here you go. Bear Advanced Speed Waxing and Skincare for $10. No question, just a big thank you for you guys. Do and share. Wow, thank you. Appreciate that. Bear
Advanced Speed Waxing and Skincare.
So assuming that's a business. Well, shout out to that business. If it is a business, then we assume it is.
Hopefully it works. And listen, like the bet, well, whatever, but like the benefit you get of, I guess, listening to this is that at least in the coming months, if you want to know the offensive coordinator, you want to know the quarterback that's coming in, we're going to do some deep dives. That's safe to say, Kyle.
Joe Blewett has done several extensive quarterback reviews.
I'm done.
You're not done. If they send Derek Carr or Lamar Jackson, you're going to crank out.
I did not. I think I counted
4 different parts.
9 hours on Zach Wilson for nothing. Like, now we have to do this shit again. But we appreciate you.
Super chat is Jay from Seattle. Thank you, Jay from Seattle.
We appreciate you. So Kyle, we kind of left off a little bit on quarterbacks, at least before we got into some of the Corey Davis stuff. We talked about, Rodgers. We talked about some of the other guys. What is your general, and this is a very, very deep topic that I don't necessarily want to go through all the twists and turns of at this very moment. But your general feeling on, and maybe we will, because it's the offseason. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, which, by the way, we had to talk about a lot of stuff. You showed up late, but we had to talk about, are we doing every other week now? Are we not? Our last offseason schedule was me solo, Kyle, me solo, Kyle, me solo, Kyle. So maybe that's what we'll do. We got to discuss that as well. But nonetheless, getting back into the quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, very, very complicated subject with Lamar Jackson, but what are your feelings on him as the Jets quarterback of, 2023, the knee, the recent comments from, Harbaugh and saying, like, I think there's been some, like, a little bit of jabs in the media. He didn't go to the Bengals game with the team. He might need complete reconstruction of the PCL. He's been injured more. He's still an MVP type candidate when healthy. He's limited, that famous like top hat type passing chart of him. Can't throw out to the numbers. Intermediate to inside, he's good. Obviously, a very, very good running quarterback. You need a very specific offensive coordinator with him. And again, I know at Louisville he ran more of a pro-style offense, but is that what he's absolutely best in? I would say, okay, yeah, I think he'd be decent in pro-style offense, but you definitely want to incorporate some QB power, counter, draws, etc. into that system. So does your coordinator, does Marcus Brady know those type of runs? Is he good to teach those? So it's very, very deep with Lamar Jackson, but in general, let's start breaking this down a little bit, brick by brick.
So I've always liked Lamar as a player. I remember that 2018 quarterback draft. I watched a ton of those guys. Granted, it was harder for me to get coach's film at that point in time, but I guess I did have access to a little bit of it. But nonetheless, I watched a lot of their broadcast angles, and whether it was Darnold, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson, I didn't really watch too much of what the hell is that garbage Steelers quarterback who went to Oklahoma State. I didn't really watch him because I wasn't interested in him. But Josh Rosen, I watched a ton of these guys, and we had the 6th pick in the draft that year. Now we ended up trading up to 3, but my basic thought was I was fine with taking Lamar Jackson at 6 if that's who. And I'm trying to think, where exactly did I have him ranked? I know I had him higher than Josh Allen. I believe I had him lower than Josh Rosen. I know I had him lower than I did like him actually better than Sam Darnold. I will say that. I'm on record for saying I liked, and I actually remember, I'm going to say this right now, I liked Lamar Jackson better than Sam Darnold, and I went on to Ben Blessington, who was co-host on a podcast for JetsXFactor.com with Michael Nania, Cool Your Jets. He used to host another show with Kyle Fahey back then called The Jet Take. I remember going on there and saying I like Lamar Jackson better than Sam Darnold. So I'm on record for saying that. I think Lamar Jackson is a fine player. He's a good player. He's a good player overall. Now, with that being said, what makes Lamar Jackson good in part is the total package that he brings. And a lot of that is what he can do with his legs. All right. So my thing is that, and I remember saying this, like,
hey,
and
Kyle, I'm gonna really interrupt you too with the Lamar Jackson leg things, because Saleh, a guy who like defensive coordinators are always scared of the running quarterback and how difficult the game plan is or to game plan for those guys. You'd think that a defensive minded coach in Saleh would love the idea of having Lamar Jackson and the problems it creates for a defense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. No doubt about that. So, and I remember saying, and I grew up watching Mike Vick. I, remember playing Madden 2005 with Mike Vick, 95 speed, 94 agility and all that kind of stuff. Like Mike Vick was different, but I remember watching Lamar Jackson and my immediate thoughts were Lamar's a better runner overall than Mike Vick is. Mike Vick might be faster in a straight, if he has to pull away from the last defender or whatever, I think Mike Vick has a better pull away speed or whatever. He could probably win a 40-yard dash versus Lamar Jackson. But in terms of like making violent cuts, whatever, pulling the read option, Lamar Jackson was the best running quarterback I have ever seen. I said that for several years now. We were saying a ton of that week 1, hyping that game up. Anyway, but Lamar Jackson is 26 now. He's coming off a pretty serious knee injury that ended up being worse. It's kind of like that Becton injury in a way. And I'm not saying it's the same exact injury, but like they were initially saying, oh, it could be 1 to 3 weeks, something like that. And it ended up being more. It's kind of like that Becton injury dragged on. It's serious enough to the point where, he might need surgery or whatever. And, there's that big question mark. He had the ankle the previous year or whatever. And one of the things I always said was like, so you just brought up one of the flaws with Lamar Jackson. He's not a great outside the hash thrower, which, to be a good quarterback in the NFL, you need to be able to hit all the throws consistently. If you want to be an elite level quarterback, you can make any throw anywhere on the field consistently. And Lamar Jackson, he's got a good enough arm to make a lot of throws, but he does not excel in certain areas. People don't like when you say that, but it's kind of the truth. And it's one of the reasons why Lamar Jackson did slide to 32, right? Now, should he have slid to 32? I don't think so, but it's kind of the way that it happens. Here's my thing. Lamar Jackson, you trade for him. I think it's going to be, I don't see how it could be less than 3 first rounders. I really don't. Russell Wilson at 30 something went for what was it? 3 first round. It was at least 2 first rounders, then some other draft picks and all those players.
And Fant and the was it Shelby, the interior defensive lineman, was pretty solid.
He's a pretty good player. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't see how it's less than that. And the thing is, Lamar Jackson, he's already coming off injuries. And you have to think, like, some person called me a clown on Twitter for saying, listen, Lamar Jackson running the football that much, injuries will pile up. By the way, Justin Fields, another guy who ran the football a lot this year, he missed some games, right? So, like,
Lamar Jackson slides.
Another guy who runs the football, he got hurt at the end of the season, didn't he?
And Jackson slides more in the field. Like the Bears are in an interesting spot where I don't know how much they love Bryce Young or whoever, but Fields is not going to last the way he runs because he takes shots where Lamar Jackson will actually run out of bounds or slide.
Yeah, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. So Lamar Jackson, if we're talking like one of the reasons you want to go and get him is versus someone like Rodgers is, well, Lamar's younger. He could maybe be the Jets' long-term starter. But when Lamar Jackson is 30 years old, you know he's going to lose some speed. Every running back loses speed by the time Lamar Jackson's not a running back. He's a quarterback. He's not a receiver. He's a quarterback. All that's true. But one of the things that makes him good is his running ability. Well, when he loses some of that ability, he loses some of that speed. He loses some of that agility. Lamar Jackson can no longer pull the read option and get across that super uber athletic edge defender that can run a 4.6 in the 40-yard dash. Is Lamar Jackson still as good? Right. So do you want to trade all those assets for a player who is coming off a serious injury? And, like you're mortgaging your future in a way by giving up those draft picks in the future. But in 3, 4, 5 years from now, is he going to be that good? Because could he still improve as a passer? Yeah, he could still improve a little bit. But one of the things that makes him as good as he was and an MVP player like he was his legs.
Even if not, he's top 5 to 10, right? Like that's where we feel he is.
As a quarterback?
Yeah.
He's definitely closer to 10 in my opinion than 5.
Yeah, I agree.
So now, I don't have as much interest for that reason. Listen, I'll be straight up honest with you. If they get Lamar Jackson somehow, some way, there's no doubt about it. You'd have to be excited as a fan. Like that's exciting to get a player of that level of talent. But is it the smartest move? I don't think it is.
It's a loaded topic because and I think it's fair at this point to say, Kyle, we don't know. How is his knee? Because if his knee is fine and it's just okay, he needs some rest, then he did a good job sitting out the last couple of games with the Ravens this year, and he'll be the Lamar Jackson of years past, and we can rely on him and he doesn't have to be 30. We can have Lamar Jackson for what he is for the next 3 or 4 years if he's at the level he was for the past few years. But we don't know. So how are the medicals? How do the Jets feel about the medicals? And if they can't land Carr and they trade 3 first-round picks and a player for Lamar Jackson and he's an MVP candidate, then who gives a fuck? Like that's awesome. We've never had that. But I think it's fair to say that we're not sure. And he needs a specific offense, at least he needs a specific offensive coordinator to really reach his ceiling to be that top 5 to 10 guy. And how does that fit? You need a very specific backup quarterback to him because you're not going to run the same system as you are with Carr or with Jackson than you are with Mike White. They're completely different players, obviously. So I'm okay with it if they're okay with the knee. If they're not okay with the knee, then I don't want to give up all that shit for 2-3 years of Lamar Jackson where he might be diminished. So and with all that being said, you're going to figure out Lamar Jackson a lot later. They're going to figure out Carr. So if you don't land Carr and it's Lamar Jackson, what if you don't land Lamar Jackson? And then you're stuck with, again, what? If it's not Lamar Jackson and it's not Aaron Rodgers because he stays. Then we're talking about the Tannehills and the Jimmy G's of the world. And we just went to those guys from Carr because we want to take a shot at Lamar Jackson, who's obviously inevitably going to have to be figured out past February 15th when Carr's going to be figured out. So Carr is he is safer to me than Jackson, while not as high of a ceiling as Jackson, but he also gets figured out a lot earlier than Jackson, where you figure out you trade for him, you sign him, and then you have a lot of time to figure out free agents and all that shit, where Lamar Jackson might be traded on April 28th, a couple days before the draft, or whenever the draft is exactly this year. I don't know. But yeah, I would welcome the talent if he's healthy, but we don't know that. Like it's safe. I think it's something we can admit to is saying we don't know. And I don't know about Lamar Jackson's knee. Nobody does.
Yeah.
So it's
many Baltimore fans wanted answers, and they don't have them right now.
Exactly. And Scott talks to Scott Mason, play like a Jet, who's done some like stuff on Derek Carr, I think now at this point. But he has a friend, Dr.
Steven Solar or something like that.
Scholar, yeah, whatever his name is. But he's saying that he thinks Lamar Jackson might need complete reconstruction of his PCL. So we're talking about a reconstruction of a knee joint ligament, whatever the fuck we're gonna call it, at 24 years old. So how can you be confident trading, 3 first-round picks, players, multiple other picks, and giving a contract that Kyle he's talking about a fully guaranteed contract with one of the bigger injury risk in the NFL at quarterback right now. So what if he wants, you give up 3 first-round picks, he's gonna have you by the balls in terms of the contract. You have to give him 50, or I think Watson's like a little bit under 50. Maybe it's like 46.
Maybe that Watson contract was fully guaranteed.
Exactly. So what if he wants 4 years, math, $180 million guaranteed, which is like $45 million a year for a guy who's had knee problems at 24 years old. Like, it is a loaded topic with Lamar Jackson. So, but in general, if you can't land Carr and they're confident with him, awesome, let's do it. But it is there's a lot of layers to that.
Baltimore's a smart team. They wouldn't give him up for pennies, so it's going to be a lot. Would you, when you factor in everything, what you'd have to give up, would you rather take Aaron Rodgers than Lamar Jackson? Because I think you'd have to give up less for Aaron Rodgers than Lamar Jackson. But the thing with Aaron Rodgers is you might not have him for as long. So would you rather do that? Personally, I would rather do the Aaron Rodgers route. I think you give up less, and I think he's a better player, in my opinion.
I agree. If you're talking about in a vacuum, Rodgers for 2 years and Lamar Jackson for 2 years, I'd probably take Rodgers. But with that being said, Kyle, it's another question. It's another answer of I don't know, because how do they feel about the knee? If it's Lamar Jackson, they're confident in the knee, then give me Lamar Jackson because he can be here for the next 6-7 years, where Aaron Rodgers will be here for what, 2-3 maybe. But with my general feeling about how Lamar Jackson is going to be both, or acquired and his future in the NFL with his injuries and his knee problems right now, give me Aaron Rodgers as the 2. But it's just interesting with Jackson because he might be the number 1 option. But right now, I would probably say Carr 1, Rodgers 2 with a rookie in the 2nd or 3rd round. Me, at least myself personally, I would do that. I don't know if Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh do that.
Hold on, though. It's funny, like you say, rookie in the 2nd, 3rd round. That might piss Rodgers off because, again, a second round pick could be a receiver for him, right? Yeah. And he's pissed that they took Jordan Love, instead of giving him talent.
Exactly.
So I don't know about that.
And I don't think the Jets could say, okay, we're going to acquire Rodgers for $50 million a year, and then we're going to draft another quarterback when we have other needs. Like, it's not going to happen. Me personally, that's what I'd like to see happen, but it's not going to. So is Carr your number 1 right now, just in terms of so many people in the chat are saying?
All things considered, yeah. But like you said, like in a vacuum, I'd be more excited for other guys. I'd be more excited for Lamar. I would be more excited for one given year. I would be more excited for Rodgers. Yeah, definitely. But I think Carr's probably the smartest option long term. Yeah, and
I'm not a doctor, but it's almost crazy that Derek Carr at 31 is more of a solidified answer into year 3, 4, 5 than Lamar Jackson is at this point, right? So, and again, I haven't seen the medicals. I don't know the medicals. I have no idea how to look at that shit. But I almost feel safe in saying that Carr is going to be at, and there's nothing's guaranteed. But at this point right now, is Carr the better option for year 4 or 5 on the contract than Lamar Jackson is, considering the capital, the amount you're going to have to pay him, where Carr is going to be $40 million a year, where Jackson's going to be $50 million a year and fully guaranteed. So, it's a loaded topic. It really is. But Carr is my number 1 right now, just because of how safe he is, in my opinion, and plus how early you can acquire him. Because if Carr is gone and he goes on, I'm going to be very, very worried that we're walking into like one of the others, chatters or super chatters talk about Andy Dalton as our starting quarterback, or Jacoby Brissett, or Teddy Bridgewater, or Tannehill. I just can't do that. I want Carr. So past that, Kyle, which by the way, I listened. I was walking my dog. This was before I went to Costa Rica, and I'm not going to say the podcast, but I heard a podcast that you were on.
Oh, you did listen to that.
And Mike and us not giving, and Mike White 6-7 game sample size is a conspiracy that the NFL has, or people have against Mike White. So Mike White is now not an option for the Jets. I'm just. Is that an NFL conspiracy? Like what happened? Why is he not the quarterback for the Jets next year? Is 6 or 7 games not a large enough sample size for us to guarantee to be a good quarterback in the future?
It's funny, Joe, because that was I think they did that on a Friday, 2 days before the Seahawks game, and I was trying to be nice too, and by the way, those guys were really nice to me. So shout out to
ridiculous.
them.
I'm not gonna say their name, but ridiculous take in terms of conspiracy that 6, 7.
Well, you don't mind me saying the name to like give the show a shout out in case people.
Sure, yeah. I just don't know if they want.
New York Jets ground crew. Shout out to them. But one of the hosts, he really took umbrage to the fact that I said we haven't seen enough to give Mike White this big contract. And he's like, oh, I've seen enough. I don't know what you're talking about. This is propaganda cooked up straight out of One Jets Drive, what you're saying right now. Like, I was like, what? And I did give him a little pushback on that. It was his show, so I didn't want to be too rude or whatever. But then it's just, and I thought about tweeting at him during the game. And I was like, so does this game, what we saw from Mike White right now, does that make you say like maybe you were a little too high on
it's
that?
a conspiracy, Kyle. Mike White should still be the quarterback of next year because again, that one game, if those 6 or 7 games were strong enough sample size, that one game should not change his opinion. So if he says anything other than Mike White should be the starter in 2023, then I'm sorry, he's a fraud because that's what he said on the stream. So it is what it is. Now we did
get another couple super chats, Joe.
Okay, the one thing I want to ask you before the super chats. This is the thing I was going to ask you before. This is the farthest I've ever been behind the chat, but nonetheless, Saleh said that they were looking to bring in an offensive assistant, consultant, whatever it was before Michael LaFleur was fired. Now, do you think they're still doing that with bringing in an OC?
When did he say that?
I'm pretty sure that was like 2 or 3 days before Michael LaFleur was fired. We was talking about bringing in a consultant. So do you still think that's something that's going to happen, or have plans changed since LaFleur has been fired?
I don't know the answer to that question. I would say that it's quite possible it could go either way. I mean, like, the thing is so some of these offensive coordinators that they're requesting to hire, obviously the person has the ability to choose whether or not they even want to take the job. And if you're hiring some consultant, well, okay, that means that this guy's going to be in the offensive coordinator's ear. And if you're an offensive coordinator, some of these guys want a lot of autonomy, right? Like, and you were kind of talking about this, like, granted, like when you work any job, right? Like there's a hierarchy and you have to take orders from your superiors, but you also don't want to be micromanaged, right? Like as a teacher, I don't want to be micromanaged. I don't want to be told you got to teach the textbook chapter 18.3 on this day. Like that would be a nightmare to have to do that. Right. So like, you don't want to be micromanaged. So like, if you're trying to get the best offensive coordinator candidate, especially if you're going with one of these guys that has experience, but you're saying, oh yeah, well, we're going to hire this consultant who's going to, be giving you feedback and kind of looking over you. I don't know. I mean, like, so maybe they won't do that for that reason. I'm not sure. I'm kind of spitballing.
If it's a new OC who's never called plays before, you got to do it. If it's a OC who's called plays before, I'm fine with not doing it. But again, in general, if they are hiring an OC to save their jobs who's never called plays before, just like Michael LaFleur did not call plays, they're making a massive mistake, in my opinion, anyway, regardless of how impressive their interview is. Now, with that, Kyle, did we even hit on Michael LaFleur being like? Did we
not
hit
really?
On him being fired?
Not really.
Like, and apparently, there's an article today. I think is
Zach Blatt.
Zach
Rosenblatt.
Yeah. Apparently, and like, listen. At the end of the day, like we saw the problems. We saw Elijah Moore come out. We saw Denzel Mims come out. We saw Garrett Wilson be frustrated. We saw the problems on third down. We saw the problems in the red zone. And again, I don't think he was brutal, but I don't think he was great at the same time. So, like, how do you feel in general about him being fired? What, like, it was about 2 weeks ago or something? Now I don't know. Maybe a week ago. Time's kind of. If you
asked me, so it was 3 weeks ago, I believe, the last time that we did a stream. If you were to ask me at that point, do I think he deserves to be fired? I would have said no. But watching the way they finished those last 3 games, and I know that there was some problems that went above and beyond him. But I think a lot of it's coaching too. And I think sometimes really good coaching can bring you above and can, it can kind of mask some holes that you have in an offense. And I don't think he did a good job of it. I mean, like even that Seattle game, like they did have a couple good runs in that game or whatever. But one thing I kept noticing over the last month plus of the season was they weren't running the football that well. And, Bam Knight started to slow down a little bit. I know they didn't have Breece Hall the second half of the season. I'm well aware of that. Granted, the offense, like, I don't think the run game was good all year. Like even some of Breece Hall's big runs, a lot of that was just him creating shit. Like, and I get a lot of it's on the offensive line too, but like think about the Packers run, right? Like that's Breece Hall improvising right there, right? Like I think a lot of these runs were designed poorly and just wouldn't work against some of these fronts. Like watch that Dolphins game, watch that Seahawks game. You're going to see like some of these defenders are just scraping right over and there's nobody blocking them on the line of scrimmage at all. And a lot of that, it's not a matter of like, see, there's a difference between, okay, like your guy is just better than my guy. Like you have a Dexter Lawrence, he was just a better man in that playoff game. He was beating the shit out of Bradbury and all those other guys. Like sometimes you could block it perfectly on the chart. Like you could drop the X's and O's perfectly, but it just doesn't work because your guy gets his ass kicked. That wasn't the case in a lot of these games. That running game wasn't there in Miami because a lot of it was just, it wasn't going to work against those fronts or whatever. So one of the things that you saw in the Zach Rosenblatt report from today was that apparently a lot of the players found his offense to be very complicated. And that's one of the things of coaching, like, and I assume that Adam Gase really had this problem too, is like, you could be a genius drawing stuff up on the whiteboard and thinking it's going to work good. And it works well in your mind. And generally, like if you look back from film from the past, this play is going to beat cover 3 in this area or whatever. All that might be true. But if you can't communicate that to, I mean, these are young men, right? Like it's a very different generation. A lot of these guys, they grow up on videos and, they're watching things like TikTok and Instagram, short attention spans and things like that, right? Like you have to make information digestible for them to understand. And if you have these very long, and he didn't, granted his report didn't get into too many of the details as to why it was confusing. But if go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's just like the report didn't, like Elijah Moore told him to go fuck himself or something like that, which is hilarious. But
it is funny.
The thing, and like with that offense in general, and why it's so easy on the quarterback sometimes because it's really difficult on the receivers because they have a lot of like option type routes in terms of, okay, he plays off, I set it down. If he plays, press, I go deep. Like there's a lot of options in said routes to adjust to how the defense is playing it. So it's almost the complete polar opposite of Saleh and LaFleur in terms of their philosophies on offense and defense, where Saleh wants to be overly simple to allow guys to play with their hair on fire, where the offense is completely different. So if you don't have that offense down as a quarterback with how the option routes work in the offense, or as a receiver with how the option routes work in the offense, you can't play with your hair on fire. So I wonder if Saleh, with this OC search and with the who he's going to hire, he goes more to simplicity and lets guys play because with all those option routes, you have to read and think so much. In my fifth step, okay, if he's off by this much, I got to cut it in. If I don't cut it in, the quarterback's expect me to be there, but he's a little bit inside leverage, so I think I can beat him deep. I'm going to try to take him deep. Hopefully the quarterback can read me, but we're on the same page. So then he throws it short, and I'm out there. Like there's so much shit in an offense you have to think about as a receiver and a quarterback that Mike LaFleur, it overly complicated it for some of these guys. I'm not saying that it's not a good system, but I think it's a better system for guys who are experienced in the NFL, not a rookie in Garrett Wilson, a rookie, a second-year player in Elijah Moore, a rookie quarterback who's having problems, let's be frank, hitting guys who are wide open. Now he's reading guys and reading leverages and all this shit. Like, how is he going to adjust to that? So it's almost interesting how different they were in terms of their philosophies. And it's also, like you said, at the end of the day, I don't think he's not a terrible OC, but you score 0 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. You score 8 touchdowns in the last 8 weeks. Your third down calls, it's 3rd and 1, you're going empty. You're no threat of the run game. You're in the red zone versus the Vikings, you're going empty. No threat of the run game. The third down, the play calling in general, when we got into the red zone versus the Vikings, was terrible. And it wasn't just those 3 or 4 plays on that one specific red zone trip that people talk about. We broke it down on that stream after the game, Kyle. It was every time he got to the red zone, it was trick play, 3rd and long, trick play, 3rd and long, trick play, 3rd and long. And it got frustrating. It was a fake screen to one side to a screen to the other side. It was a pump fake to a smoke route to seams. It was end arounds. It was jet sweeps. He did exactly the opposite of what got him to the red zone. So he had problems. He definitely had problems. So I don't think he was a scapegoat in terms of like he wasn't bad, but it is interesting to hear Saleh come out and say, okay, well, I was put in a position where some people wanted me fired. And then 2 days later, he fires him. So was there pressure from Woody Johnson to fire him? which
it might not have
people-
been. It might not have been like a direct order, but it was kind of like implied. Like let's say Woody sits down with him in a meeting, which we know he did. Like,
Yeah.
what's the plan going forward? And like Woody's looking at him with like a stern, concerned look, like you're kind of on the hot seat. Losing 6
Yes.
games in December is absolutely unacceptable. And like Salah's thinking, like, well, shit, our defense was pretty good.
It was good.
And our offense was pretty shitty. And clearly I need to make some kind of change or else my ass might get canned. Cause sometimes like, you know, like, you think a coach might stick around, but then you have like those exit meetings or whatever. And then, oh, wow, surprise firing or whatever, because maybe the ownership doesn't like the vision going forward. Right. Like, you know, maybe it wasn't like a direct order, like you got to fire Mike LaFleur, you know, but it was just like, okay, like, well, I'm feeling a lot of this pressure. I don't want to do it, but I guess I have to, you know, it could have been just like implied maybe.
At the end of the day, like if you're solid, like listen, like and Kyle, we've talked about this, like we're friends, but if your offense didn't score 3 touchdowns in the last week, you know, 3 weeks of the year, and my job is relying on you next year, sorry, Kyle, you know, adios. And I think,
and I might be pissed, but I probably would understand, especially in the long run.
And I think that's kind of where it came. Like they were friends, you know, brother, his older brother was best man with Solomon and stuff. I think that's where it came to the report that like, oh, he's exploring other opportunities and all that shit. I think they try to let him down easy. Like, I'm not going to say that, oh, well, you know, other teams called, so they fired him. Like, I think it was a way to let him down easy. I'm not going to look too much into that. But I'm trying to think, is there anything else we want to get to before getting to the chat? The one other thing I've seen, and I'm not going to call names out, but like there are people out there who, if you go to much better, you can easily see kind of what I'm talking about, who are like, you know, Carr, no, don't want him. Lamar Jackson, no, don't want him. Aaron Rodgers, no, don't want him. Tannehill, no, don't want him. Jimmy G, no, don't want him.
They want Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes.
No, and that same person said, is the answer, you know, is it Wilson? Is it White? Is it Baker Mayfield? If Baker Mayfield are starting quarterback next year, Kyle, I'm gonna have a really, really hard time going to any games. Like he had a good game or two and then sucked ass. Minshew, everybody was so high on for a couple of weeks because he had one good game. Again, small sample size. People put a lot into small sample size.
Saints, man.
He looked terrible against the Saints. It's the same thing with Carr. Like, oh, he had a bad game, so now he's bad. Minshew had one good game against whoever it was with the Eagles. Now he's
Cowboys.
Good. Yeah, the Cowboys. So people, I'm not. What's WFN guy? I forget his name. I'll just say like, no,
Beningo?
No, he does a show with Tiki Barber, so he's gonna have his somebody will know his name.
Russillo?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I know he does a show with
to
Tiki
WFN.
Barber, but nonetheless, he's like, oh, is it Mike White or Zach Wilson? So you don't want a Carr, you don't want Lamar Jackson. Your answers are Mike White, Wilson, or Baker Mayfield. That's the smart thing to do.
It almost makes you wonder, like,
on Derek Carr.
Like if you know anything about like talk radio is so much about like
bullshit.
It's a lot more like, you know, like you're playing to certain segments and like what's going to get people interested and whatnot. I don't know. I don't even know. Almost makes you wonder if that's not even his like real genuine opinion. He's just thinking like that's going to garner listenership or whatever, which I don't even know why that would be a smart move to say that, because who's going to be excited about Mike White versus Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers? I don't get it. Do you want to get to some super chats, Joe? Because I know we got at least 2 that we haven't mentioned yet.
Yeah, super chats, and then we have to hit the chat.
All right, so Joe, sorry for pronouncing your last name wrong. Pekulik says, so I would hire Joe Brady or Johnson if a guy like Shermer gets hired as the assistant head coach. Thoughts? Pat Shermer is a good offensive coordinator. Certainly not a good head coach, but he is a good offensive coordinator in my opinion. Would Joe Brady want to be paired with somebody like Pat Shermer? I'm not so sure about
Shermer's
that.
called plays before, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Shermer's been the offensive coordinator for some good offenses for sure.
The only way I think like a assistant coach, assistant offensive coordinator, whatever it is, gets hired is if it's an OC without experience, and that role for them is and the assistant offensive coordinator that's also a step up. Like maybe, you know, let's say is it Johnson from the Eagles that the QB coach? Like is offensive consultant a higher role than QB coach in the coaching world? I don't know. But it has to be a step up for that guy, while also not being for an OC who has play calling experience, because I don't think it's a good situation to say, hey, you know, Joe Brady, we like your offense, but you're going to have, you know, Shermer giving you assistance. Like it's just not going to work out. So I don't know if they're really going to have an offensive consultant, because in my mind, they're going to hire a guy with experience, you know? So,
Thanks for the super chat, Joe.
Yeah, anything else to add to that? I don't know.
No, I don't think I have anything to add to that one. Jan, great supporter of the show. Good buddy. Yeah, we met him in person at the tailgate. Jan, thank you so much. $20. He says, "Yo, boys, missed the stream."
I'll always say I see Jan's like profile picture, like just sitting at a desk.
He said that picture was like from like 10 years ago.
He just looks like a nerdy guy who you'll never expect. He walks over, he's like 6'8", Shrek looking guy, just massive human being. Like,
Shrek, that's making him sound ugly, man. That's
no, I
nice.
know, no, I'm not. No, he's a beautiful man, but he's a very large guy. Don't fuck with Jan.
Yeah, we were asking him. When we saw him, we were having so much problems at the offensive tackle. We were asking him if he could suit up and play some.
Yeah, I think he has banged up knees though too, like Lamar Jackson. So, Andrew, appreciate your time to start super chat only. Great takes, guys. Yeah, there's a fine line between did we just hit on the very big chats that we see that are like very kind of pertinent to the current talking point, and then hit only the super chats. But I feel bad not hitting like everybody's chats. I did.
Joe, you know what's so funny, man? Like, so we were doing these weekly streams during the season. We were getting like more super chats and more interaction in the off season. It seems like that's always the case. We get more interaction in the off season, even this season where we were 7-4 at one point.
Mm-hmm.
The off season is always king for the Jets.
Hopefully we get to a point in our fandom where that's not the case, Kyle.
All right, I think that's all the super chats for now, Joe. So you could take it in whatever direction you want.
Yeah, I'm this chat right here from Christian. Miss y'all boys. Hope all is well. We missed you too, Christian. This is from 6:08. So I am almost 2 hours behind in the chat.
Well,
so I'm gonna have to
just skip it. Just get some of the good ones.
I'm gonna have to fly through some of these chats. I would like wide receiver, but O-line makes sense. I guess is at pick 13. I don't really know the receivers.
I don't think it makes sense to go receiver unless like there was like an absolute stud, but I don't. Why was an absolute stud going to fall to 13?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it could happen. Devonta Smith fell to what 12, whatever it was. 14?
I really like with Jackson Smith. Enigma is his name.
Jigba.
Jigba. He's been very impressive every time I've watched him. But with the Jets, like, is there any chance you could see them? This is loaded because the Jets' cap space is not very high this
Joe
year.
Douglas loves offensive line, so it'd be hard to see him pass on offensive line if a good one was there that he liked.
But if they're not, like, and the thing is, do the Jets go again like all in with receiver? Do they cut a Corey Davis to trade for a DeAndre Hopkins for a couple more $1 million a year, like to try to get that big time receiver to pair with Garrett Wilson?
His contract's big.
I think it's like $16 million next year or something.
Really?
I don't think it's
for that year, maybe.
I don't think it's huge, to be honest. But I could be wrong.
I guess they paid him a lot of his money already. Listen, DeAndre Hopkins, there's no doubt like he's a good player. Like you could instantly see that once he was finally activated. Shout out to Eagle in the fantasy league who drafted DeAndre Hopkins when everyone was sleeping on him.
Which by the way, can I talk about?
Did you win?
The full, obviously the
DeMar Hamlin thing. So
the Jets X league the Jet X league with just the writers and like the actual workers for it. I won that league because it was me versus Golden, and I was like a 92% chance to 8% chance. I'm like, listen, I'll send you a couple extra bucks, but I was gonna win that game. Like let's be real here. So I won that one, I would say, and then I was in the Jet X subscriber league versus Eagle. And it was like 50-50, like very, very close. So we just decided to completely split it. So I'm a co-champion in that. And I was in another league in the league you're in, the Dynasty League, 50-50 again. So we just split the money. So I'm co-champion 1A, 1B in 2 leagues and a champion in another. So 3 out of 6 leagues I won. So that's not a bad number. Even though maybe I would have lost all of those, technically. Or I would have won the Jet X League, the Jet X Writer League. Maybe I lost to both Eagle and then Jesse in the league we're in, but it's just it's obviously hard when that happens, Which obviously I'm happy he's healthy. That sucked. Like I was watching. Yeah. I think I was in Costa Rica when that happened, and obviously it's scary, dude. Like I guess a certain way the heart pumps. You hit it at the exact right time, with the exact right force. It can stop the heart like that. Scary as hell. It's a risk I know that they know they're taking. It's hard to see in person and hear they're doing CPR on the field. But I'm happy that we don't have to discuss it in the sense where maybe like the couple of days after it's, well, is he healthy? Is he going to live? All that stuff, because it seemed at a certain point is obviously unknown. Now we know he's happy, healthy, tweeting all that stuff. So thank God he's okay.
Yeah. absolutely. And it's kind of cool to see how everybody supported him so much. And,
Yeah.
even though you might be rivals with the team, like Sauce Gardner was wearing like a Hamlin jersey and stuff, it's kind of see how people support people when, crazy shit like that happens. But the point that we got off on that tangent on was about DeAndre Hopkins. There's no doubt that he's an upgrade. He's a good player. You could he's been, dude, ever since that dude entered the league, he's been dominant. You're probably not as high on him, and you probably thought he was a little bit overrated because his route running is, he's so good at contested catches. He's so good at being very physical, but not the most nuanced, shifty route runner out there. But there's no doubt that he's a great player, and he kind of, Garrett Wilson, in theory, should be really good at contested balls. And I think when he gets a better quarterback who kind of throws him some more of those like high point balls or whatever, where he has to go up and get it, we're going to see even more how good he is at getting contested catches. But they're a little bit of a different receiver in some of the things that they do. So there's no doubt that he brings something to the offense that the Jets could use. I just don't think it's the best utilized of resources. I feel like DeAndre's probably going to want to go to a team that's really in need of a receiver, but probably has some other areas of their roster more shored up. Offensive line's kind of really the big thing. So if Joe Douglas is going to make a trade for an offensive guy, probably should be for a lineman. Someone like Tunsil doesn't seem realistic, but could there be someone else out there? Maybe.
Yeah. I agree. Tunsil's he's like $25 to $30 million a year, whatever it is, massive contract. I could be wrong, so maybe I'm overestimating right now. But Unique Islam could be wrong on the pronunciation. Is it best? And this is a conversation, Kyle, which I don't think we necessarily have to say one or the other right now. But it's an interesting point and something we've obviously considered. Is it better to have Carr for $35 to $40 million a year ish, versus Lamar Jackson at 50, and giving up 3 first-round draft picks and multiple players? Let's just say Carr and 3 first-round picks, a tackle, a safety, a receiver or a linebacker versus Lamar Jackson, and none of those things. And obviously the huge risk. It's a conversation to have about which one you rather have. So again, it's obviously an interesting point as well.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that Carr, for the number that you said, and giving up much less than draft compensation is much safer. And
it's safer. Simon, I was Matthias, Blewett. What's your take on Roman OC? He knows O-line and how to get the run game going. Obviously, he's been paired with running quarterbacks for a lot of his career, right? He had Kaepernick, and then he had
Tyrod Taylor in Buffalo.
Tyrod Taylor, so he's been around a lot of running OCs. So would he work?
And by the way, the Bills, if I'm not mistaken, at least one of those years where he was with Rex Ryan in Buffalo, I think it was their first year, because he ended up getting fired in his second year. The Bills absolutely had a top 5 rushing attack, but I think they were closer to 1. You had guys like Carlos Williams popping off runs. Fred Jackson at the end of his career was popping off big runs. You had Tyrod Taylor breaking off runs sometimes. So they kind of had and Shady McCoy at the end of his career breaking off some big runs. They had guys like Richie Incognito and Eric Wood on the offensive line. They had a vaunted running attack. So Greg Roman is definitely very good for building up run games. That's kind of, honestly, I think that's one of the things that resurrected Alex Smith's career, because he didn't have to do too much from the passing game, because he had good running games in San Fran. Those when he had Jim Harbaugh and obviously Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator. So Greg Roman, is he good for someone like Lamar? But it seems like Lamar and the Ravens kind of want to move on from. So I don't see them pairing up Roman with Lamar in New York. And Roman, do you want to pair him with somebody like Carr or something? Would Carr want that? So Roman, very good for the run game. But if you want to build up your passing game and develop a quarterback, I don't think that's the answer. Probably not.
Yeah, I agree. It's if you're bringing in, and I don't know how much the hate of Lamar and Roman is actually real, but in general, okay, if Roman means Lamar, okay, but Roman, and this is just a general feeling, Roman plus Carr, does it fit based on what the type of offenses he's run in the last couple of years, last decade? I would say no. Afram completely agree with this. Carr is more realistic to obtain than Rodgers and Jackson. You can't sit and wait. He's more realistic to obtain, and he's also earlier in the process. So you're taking Carr, seems very realistic, where Rodgers and Jackson are almost No, I'm not saying like pipe dreams. Like they're possible. Rodgers probably more than Jackson. But you can't miss out on Carr because you want to hope for those guys and then miss out on both those guys because you're, again, lack of a better term, you're left with your dick in your hand. And I don't want to be left with my dick in my hand, Kyle. That's not the type of guy I am. I can't have that. So give me Carr, option number one, because of exactly what Afram is saying, realistic and the timeline of it all. So, explain to me how off of 2022 film, how Carr is better than Geno. And it's a very broad question to ask.
He might have been debating with somebody in the chat. Maybe they were going back and forth with that point.
Yeah.
From what I saw, some of the Geno games that I saw, I thought he was pretty solid. He did make one really bad mistake in the Jets game that we saw him play, where he almost threw a pick six or he almost threw a pick in the flat that could have potentially been a pick six if he put if he didn't get hit and he put a little bit more juice on the ball. Mosley could have had a pick six.
Even if like it's not like Geno was Geno of 2014, 2013 with the Seahawks this year. Geno was what? Solid this year. Would you take Geno of this year with the Jets this year? Fuck yeah.
Yeah. No, Geno. I mean,
I'm not saying
he had a couple of those plays where he made with
year.
his legs, like that. It was that 1 3rd down play where he, bought a little bit of time. He was under a little bit of pressure, and then he was able to flick it to the running back who took it for like 40 yards. Yeah, no, Geno was solid.
Yeah, and this is a point we made, which we appreciate the chat, Austin Davidow. This is something that even without Corey Davis, we mentioned this. Like we are expecting, and I think fans should expect the Jets to cut Berrios at this point. If they keep Berrios, it's to try to save face. And hopefully he improves, but I think that'd be a massive mistake. He's never worth the contract.
And even as a punt returner, he was a huge disappointment this year. He was
massive, dude. How many fucking punts are going to bounce the 20 or 15 yard line? He's going to let it bounce right past him and land at the 5 yard line. Like it's a basic elementary punt returning that he cannot execute this year. He's terrible. He's terrible.
I don't know the numbers. Maybe Nania knows, but it feels like this year more than most years, the Jets were pinned inside the 5 more times than recent. Than most years.
He is brutal. But we talk about the Jets receiver position being a sneaky need because we assume Berrios would be cut. So you need that 4 or 5. If Corey Davis and we talked about offensive line, safety, linebacker being the primary needs, with receiver being that next secondary need, correct? But if Davis is cut, receiver becomes a primary need, just as big of a need as a linebacker or safety, in my opinion. Like you need 3 receivers in today's NFL. If you get rid of Davis, you need 3. Do not give me the Mims shit. Mims is not he was terrible this year. Terrible. And even the good blocking he had for a good game or two. Was it the second Pats game?
And he still had several false starts this year.
Dude, penalties, drops. The motherfucker, dude, he has to catch balls with his chest. He has no hands, which was completely opposite of what he was at Baylor. And
we did. Solid. Our superlatives from 2 years ago. I had him as the best hands on the team.
He was solid or 2 for a game in run blocking. But I think it's the second Pats game. He sucked in run blocking. So Mims is terrible at this point. You cannot rely on him to be a 3 or 4. That'd be a massive mistake. So if Davis is gone, it's a primary need. If Davis is back, number 4 or 5, it's still a secondary need in my opinion. But it's right after linebacker, safety, even as offensive line as a secondary need. So,
Garrett Wilson almost never has this problem, but you see it a little bit with Elijah Moore, and you definitely see it with Denzel Mims. But I don't get how especially if you're a player like Mims, when you play such a small percentage of the snaps, and granted you might not be on the front side of a read in the progression, but you just run such a half-assed route that by halfway through the route you just start pulling up basically jog through the route.
He gave up on plays too.
That happens all the time with him. And dude, you don't tell me you're tired.
So I'm gonna hit on a few things of this really quick. Andy Dalton was PFF 7th ranked quarterback this year. Let me read the rest of this. Can PFF be that far off? Jets X Factor writers cite. So the thing with this is cites PFF grades, and we vet our writers. I'm not gonna say I don't know who still cites PFF. I know there was a concerted effort not to cite PFF because we don't agree with a lot of what PFF does. I can't speak for how many writers do we have now? About 20 to 30 writers. I cannot speak for 20 to 30 writers that we have. I don't agree with all their opinions. I definitely do not. But in general, you do not hear me cite PFF. You're listening to this show, so I don't give a fuck what Andy Dalton is ranked.
You won't really cite the grade, but from time to time you might say, okay, well, they said
he took this many snaps in the slot. Anything that is factual, okay. Their rankings are garbage. They've been garbage. They rank as soon as I saw DeJuan Landry was a top 5 safety for them that 1 year. I was like, they suck. That was with me knowing nothing about football. Again, I cannot speak for 20 to 30 writers that we have. If they still do cite it, I'd be curious to hear who actually does cite it, because I'd like to speak to them because we shouldn't be citing them other than for factual things.
Yeah, like, are they citing the grade? Are they citing the grade, or are they citing like, okay, well, he had this percentage of tight window throws or whatever? Which again, even that is like, I guess, somewhat subjective or whatever. But yeah, I just checked, and his grade is 82.1. So that is curious. How many, like, well, let me see. One of the things with PFF grades and grades in general is, like, generally when people have a smaller sample size, you also got to take that with a grain of salt. But he did have 378 attempts, 18 touchdowns, 9 picks. So it's not like it's such a small volume size where it, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, was that offense good in New Orleans? It didn't seem like it was good. They didn't win a lot of games.
Well, I think he can be up to that Jacoby Brissett, Teddy Bridgewater, Gardner Minshew type level. Yeah, fine. Why not? If you're going to stake your job on Andy Dalton being the answer for the Jets next year, that is a massive problem. They have struck out and missed multiple times at that point, I would assume. So hopefully that does not happen.
By the way, Kirk Cousins' PFF grade this year, 77.4, which means Andy Dalton's higher than him. I know Kirk Cousins the previous year had a really high grade, but like, is Andy Dalton better than Kirk Cousins? No way. Now, I know a lot of people like to give Cousins shit for a lot of reasons. And granted, I know Dexter Lawrence really kind of wrecked that game at the end, but it was kind of really unforgivable that it was 4th and 8 and he hit the check down in the flat. Like, you at least got to try to push the ball down the field with your season on the line. Yeah. But yeah, Andy Dalton's clearly not better than him. So I don't know, man. Like, you definitely got to take that with a huge grain of salt. But I don't know. Maybe Andy Dalton had a bit of a resurgence of his career. I don't know. But to say that he's, the long-term answer. I mean, he's always been like a jag in terms of talent and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, and again, like, I can't keep up with everything. Like, we try to vet people, like, generally, like, they'll submit articles and what stuff. I'm like, okay, they know something, like, we'll bring them on. We don't want to bring on like a bunch of duds. But how many articles do we put out now per day, Kyle? 5 to 15 articles a day on JetX. Like, we are doing well, so we don't put out an article once a day. Like, I can't read every article we put out. So who's still citing PFF for us? I don't know. If they are for grades, I don't think they should be. We've kind of discussed that, so hopefully we don't. But if it's for more solidified things, okay, he blitzed this many times. Okay, cool. That's fine. That's not subjective. Subjective stuff. Should you trust PFF? No. Do we trust them with their grades? Absolutely, unequivocally not, Kyle. You or I do not. We don't cite them because they suck. So it is what it is. I've said that many times. They've been called out. How do you change Quinn Williams' grade from a 64 to an 85 in 2 days, and then come out and admit you didn't watch all the snaps, so there's a problem with the grading, and then still try to be credible? Like, they suck. They suck. He goes up 20 points because he decided to watch the game. Like who was? And we both know some people who are working for PFF. Yikes! That's all I'll say. Like, come on, man. So, Luka, I want Monken or Reich as my top options. The only thing with Reich, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Reich was under Peterson when he got to be a big wig with the Eagles, and Peterson was the play caller, and then Reich was the guy to kind of want to bring in, or not the guy to kind of, he was the guy to vouch for, so the word I'm looking for, vouch for Carson Wentz to come to the Colts, and that failed. So I like Reich because of experience, but Reich this?
I don't think he should have got fired, though, honestly. And I think he did some good things with the Colts. Yeah,
my question is Reich. While I don't think he would be a bad option, what makes him some god that people like say he's so good? Because I haven't seen or heard much that I'm like, oh my god, he's so impressive.
Well, I mean, they definitely had some pretty good offenses despite not having a stable option at quarterback for several years. I mean, like, listen, was Wentz good with the Colts last year? No, but overall their offense was pretty good. They had a good offense when Phillip Rivers was there. If I'm not mistaken, did Reich catch Lux last year in Indianapolis or no?
That's not a question I can answer right now.
He might have. I feel like there was who was the guy right? Oh no, was it Brissett? Who was the starting quarterback the year before?
I think it was Brissett. Okay, yeah, for like 1 or 2 years before.
Yeah, I think it was pretty. I think they were pretty solid, even though it's Brissett who he is what he is. I mean, I'm not saying Frank Reich's a god, but I think he's pretty damn solid. But the thing is so here's the thing you have to wonder now. So Reich had Sirianni. Now Sirianni has done some pretty good things with the Eagles. So you also have to wonder, okay, well, maybe it wasn't so much Reich as a head coach. Maybe a lot of it was on Sirianni, and the offense kind of fell apart once he went to the Eagles. I
Exactly.
I mean, like,
what are your thoughts on Ron Milton getting an OC?
No.
Okay. Because he's a charismatic guy. Does he deserve a shot? No, he's a tight ends coach. And while he might be a great OC one day, we're not going to give him a shot because what is it? You got to not be afraid to die or whatever that quote was. Like, yeah, awesome, but not get ourselves.
I think so many people put so much stuff into that hype stuff, and don't get me wrong. Like
the one Jets drive stuff, it doesn't really mean much.
Yeah.
Let's see. Jimmy Jets AR-15 will take 3 years to this is the stuff I can't really.
Is he that raw? Is he that raw?
I don't know.
I don't know. Some people were saying some of the same shit about Patrick Mahomes. I'll say that I haven't watched any, and when I say any, I haven't watched any of AR-15. And apparently, he doesn't like to go by that name anymore. Apparently, he just wants Anthony Richardson.
I think of Allen Robinson when I think of AR-15.
Oh yeah,
I don't really think of Anthony Richardson. But
by the way, what happened to him this year?
I don't know. The Rams have sucked in general, but and that's the thing. Too. I'll tell you, I haven't watched him at all, and there will be other channels out there. But yeah, Anthony Richardson, good guy, 2nd round pick. I've watched 0 minutes of film on him, but really good guy from Florida. I'll be interested. I'm just not going to do that. I don't know. Could he take 3 years to develop? Maybe. So go get D-Hop. Yeah, I think. What can you look up his contract?
By the way, if you're telling me a guy is going to take 3 NFL years to develop, there's no way he's worth the 2nd round pick.
That's true.
3 years.
DeAndre Hopkins contract. Let's see what it is. I wouldn't be the thing with the Jets that's interesting, Kyle, is if I'm sure you've looked at it. You look at their salary cap space for this year; it's not very high. But in 2024, we're projected $100 million in cap space. Now I know you have to consider
Mosley contracts coming off the books.
Yeah, no, it's not the books technically in that formula. I'm assuming because he's here for another 2 or 3 years, but you have to assume Carr, you have to assume Quinn Williams, etc. But they have a lot of flexibility down the road where they don't have as much flexibility, this coming year. But let me see his contract, DeAndre Hopkins. So if you were to get him, oh my God. So he's a $30 million cap hit and $26 million cap hit next year.
Yeah,
but I don't know how that works out with trading for him. I thought it was much less, but obviously I could be an asshole and could be completely wrong. I thought it was $16-ish million this year.
I knew I had a feeling you were off by that.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's see over the cap. I'm not good with trading. How much do you get? Yeah, 30 million. Okay, so on OTC it says 2023
receivers not the problem for the Jets.
No, but it says 30, and then 26 is 2024. But the dead cap is 2020 or 22 million this year and 11 million next year, and the cap saving is 8 million and 14 million. So do the Jets only pay 8 million and 14 million? I'm not good at that stuff. So
by the way, if we can just take one moment too, because we spend some time talking about Alan Lazard and Jacoby Myers and Elijah Moore and some of these guys. If I can spend one moment talking about Elijah Moore, if we get the right quarterback and the right OC in here, we've had our fair criticisms of Elijah Moore. I think he's
off the field.
He's bad in the run game. He can't block for shit.
He gives up
on plays.
Yep.
Maybe we overhyped some of his talent a little bit, and I'm mostly speaking about myself, not really you. But I think that there's a certain way you have to use him. Maybe he's not. So one of the things I really liked about his tape, and I remember saying this so much after we first evaluated him, right after we drafted him, I thought he was going to be much better on deep vertical balls than he is. And the thing is, he's got no contested catch ability, from a catching over the head type of catch. If it's the ball squared up and he's coming over the middle, he can reach out and extend with his hands. But he's so small and doesn't really have leaping ability or whatever. But they used him so bad this year. First of all, just in terms of sheer percentage, he should have been on the field way more than he was at various points in the year. early in the season, they were running him on way too many vertical balls. And then at the end of the season, like, yeah, he played more snaps and stuff. But how many times did they run him on end arounds and they just kept him in the flat, never went to him in the flat?
Yeah.
He was just used as a fucking decoy.
Well, and that was one of the problems I had with Mike LaFleur was the Shanahan system. Like, you're going to run these guys in these orbit motions, jet motion, all that stuff. And every once in a while, you're going to hit them on the jet motion and kind of have it be a threat. When do we hit them?
When did you give him the ball on an end around this year? Did you do it even once?
You're taking a guy out of the offensive play to never hit them, and they're not a threat. So you're not affecting. Now, if you take them out of the play to make the linebackers, the safeties, the corners bite up to hit a route behind them because they've seen it on tape before, yeah, they hit this guy every once in a while, we're going to bite on it. That makes sense. But you're taking a guy out of the play, out of the structure of the play to not affect the defense. So that was a problem as well. They were like, he was creative, but not in a smart way at times. So that was one of my problems with LaFleur as well.
Yeah. And by the way, so it's naturally very interested for a player to get disinterested when they're used like that. So like, look at how hyped up he was when he had his only touchdown for the year, right? Against the Bears, right? Like, you get an offensive coordinator that knows how to utilize him better, right? Mm-hmm. Particularly put him more in the slot, especially get him off the line of scrimmage, because you don't want people jamming him. He's not great at defeating press.
Which is one of the questions we had at Ole Miss.
Yeah, but like, dude, like get him in space, let him get a running head start. And once he gets his legs churning, he's very shifty in open space. He's going to make people miss. And like, if he can get some balls where, like, cause he doesn't have like long arms, like he extends them, but they're not long, but give him the ability to get to make the catch. Right. And he can make people miss after the catch, but you got to get him in space more. Right. They didn't do enough of that. So like, you get him a coordinator that can do that more. All of a sudden his confidence goes up and he starts dogging it a little bit less and stuff. I really think we can see an explosion from him too. And Garrett Wilson, I still think he's scratching the surface too. And by the way, we have none other than Breece Hall himself confirming what we're just saying. Elijah out there just doing some cardio training. So inside source right there, verifying what we're saying.
I'm curious to see which, by the way, we
thank you, Breece.
Super chat, Breece Hall. I'm curious to see like if his knee rehab is going to be like accelerated because he waited 2 weeks to get the surgery. Apparently that's better. I don't know if that's true. Like maybe the inflammation.
Well, I think you have to wait for the inflammation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember that Revis did that.
So Joe says, Joe Pekulik, hi guys, great show as usual. Don't think Lamar is coming. They fired Roman, who was the main reason he wanted to leave. Maybe it's part of the reason he wanted to leave, but also seemed like some of the tweets he's put out recently. He's like, what was that one tweet? He's like, there was
you
want to feel appreciated and all this.
Yeah,
stuff.
Exactly. Like when you have something you love, you value it, you cherish it, you don't deny it, something like that.
And sorry, I didn't comment on the Elijah Moore stuff. Elijah Moore, I'm not going to like back down on what I thought he was at Ole Miss. So I think he's going to be a guy. What were his stats this year, Kyle? 500 yards, 400 yards,
1 touchdown. I know that.
Yeah, I think he could legitimately be a guy who's getting you 800 to 1,000 yards a year. Like I still think he could be a very, very good starting level receiver. So I'm not going to look at this year as a bad quarterback, an OC who didn't know how to use him, and say this is what Elijah Moore is. I am still much more to the side of what I thought Elijah Moore was going to be after year one than I am closer to the side of what I thought he was, or what he is after like year two. Like he's not a 500 yard guy. Like he is definitely closer to a 1K guy, good starter, very good route runner. Good athleticism. Should he be an outside vertical deep threat receiver? No. Should he be against press? No. But could he be a very good slot receiver for the Jets for years to come with it? Garrett Wilson on the outside? Fuck yeah. And Garrett Wilson was great year one. Think about Garrett Wilson breaking Jets rookie receiving records with 3 different quarterbacks getting over 1,100 yards, where Zach Wilson at times couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. So I have a lot of faith in Garrett Wilson being a top 10 to 15 guy for years to come. And I think Elijah Moore is a very good starting receiver with the correct offense around him, with a guy putting him in the correct spot. So,
yeah.
Johnny Reb says nobody can explain to me why it's good for the Ravens to go up on Lamar, and it's also good for us to get him. Doesn't the team that sees him every day know best? That's completely a part of the solution, like or part of the problem is, and they see him every day. They're giving up on him. Do they see something with the knee? Like, we have faith in the Jets medical staff. Did they have confidence in what James Robinson knee was going to be? Now maybe they put a little bit more into Lamar Jackson, which they should put the same into everybody who they're going to give him a couple $1 million or capital to give up. to acquire, but it's part of it, Johnny. It's like if he was an MVP, top 10 guy they were completely happy with for the next couple of years, they had faith in his with his knee for the next couple of years, and they're confident in the offense he can run. Are they going to get rid of him at 24 years old? No, they're not. So obviously he's flawed in some type of way if they're willing to trade him. So nobody could give you a reason because it wouldn't make sense to trade a guy who's an MVP type candidate. So there are definitely flaws with Lamar Jackson. And those are things we have to consider, right? Like how much we're willing to give up for him. So
yeah, Johnny Reb, this is a good point. I mean, like, just think about the trade that we saw last offseason. Why did the Seahawks decide to move on from their Super Bowl winning quarterback who almost won them a second one, who was their best quarterback in franchise history, Russell Wilson? You know, maybe they saw like, okay, maybe Russell's losing a little bit of his, you know, his movement ability and stuff. And a lot of his game is predicated on that. You know, we got this huge deal that we might not be able to get in a future year. Maybe it makes sense for us to move on. So like, you know, I mean, like, yeah, they do see him every day. They do know best. And obviously we're starting to hear a lot more of these stories than we've heard in recent years about how Russell Wilson's personality rubs some of his people the wrong way. And like, I remember Richard Sherman saying, like, Richard Sherman, a guy who, you know, grew up, like, he and Russell Wilson were young pups coming in the league together. And like, even like Richard Sherman said like something along the lines of like, you had to, in order to contact Russell, you need to like go through his manager or something like that. So like, apparently that rubbed some people the wrong way on his team or whatever.
That would definitely rub me the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I mean, like, and I'm not saying that that's at all the case with Lamar Jackson, but obviously like maybe that is another reason why the Seahawks decided to move on from Russell. So obviously the team that has him, sees him every day, has seen him every day for years, knows him best. So if they decided to move on from Lamar Jackson, I wouldn't say it's a red flag, but it's like,
it's a red flag.
It's
a red flag. It's a flag. It might be a yellow flag.
Some kind of flag. Yellow flag. You know, caution.
Yeah, maybe a yellow flag.
Caution.
Swolsey says, Kyle, it's funny how this works. Kyle speaking the truth. I don't know what this was an hour ago. And then another chat.
Yeah, I don't know.
Please correct Kyle. So I don't know what that was about. Dean,
it might have been when I was talking about Lamar. I was talking about Lamar for a little bit. Could have been about that.
How much comp would we give up for Derek Carr? I think the max I'd be willing to give up is a second round pick.
Yeah.
I think it's more likely a third or a fourth round pick? Probably. But if you're telling me right now, hey Kyle, give up the what would it be? Pick 45 in the draft for Derek Carr. I do it.
I would do it.
Right. Carr averages 15 games a season. I think you're wrong, Lou.
That's definitely wrong. I know there was like,
because he's only missed 2 games, right?
He missed 2 games this year, right? It's a 17-game season. He only played in 15, but they benched him for the last 2. It wasn't because of injury. 2016, second to last game of the year, he broke his leg. I don't know that he missed a game in any other season other than that. There might have been one other season where he missed 1 game, but that's it. Like, he's like, this is a guy who starts every game, like pretty much every year.
Can you answer this and then go on for a little bit more while I break the seal, and then we can close out the last 20 to 30 minutes of the show? Because I'm dancing a little bit over here. So
Go ahead, Joe. You can trust me.
Go ahead.
All right. NYC Camper says, hey, Kyle, will any of these available quarterbacks be great in 5 years? I'm not worried about long-term. Okay. I actually did see this at the time when you posted it, but Joe wanted to like discuss other things and stuff. This is a very good point. Especially, and if you're Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, dude, what are the chances that you're going to be around in 5 years? So it's a very, very, very good question. But as a fan, I'm not going to root for any other team. And I am concerned about the long-term future. I mean, one of the reasons why you're so happy about, like, I was just thinking about the Chargers the other day. And I know some people don't like Phillip Rivers that much or whatever. He never won a championship or whatever. But think about a team like that. Like, they don't know what it's like to be a Jets fan and have incompetent quarterback play. So they had Phillip Rivers for 17 years, and he was an above average quarterback every single year, nearing top 10 status many of those years. All right. If not well within the top 10, many of those years. And then they immediately went and got Justin Herbert after that. Right. So like, and by the way, has Herbert missed any games yet? Not to my knowledge. And Rivers really never missed any games. So like, not only were those guys good, but also very healthy. So there is something about like, just, like knowing that you got the quarterback position settled for the long term. There's something very comforting in that. At least it seems to me. I don't know what it feels like, but it seems like it's comforting to me. So I'm concerned about 5 years, but I see why Douglas and Saleh, who might not be with the Jets in 5 years, wouldn't be. I don't know if that answers the question, but I know you didn't hear it all. I was just talking about the Chargers, Joe.
I have AirPods in, so I heard everything.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which, by the way, does Brandon Stanley deserve a job at this point? It's kind of crazy they gave up that big of a lead, and then you lose Mike Williams playing him in a meaningless Week 18 game. So, it's obviously it's interesting, and for me, I don't think the Jets that it's. Do the Jets care about long term? No, I think they're concerned about keeping their jobs. For me, I am concerned because I think Rodgers could last, 2, maybe 3 years, where Carr can give you 5, 6, 7, which is part of the appeal of Carr. And then again, Lamar Jackson could last 2 years, Kyle.
I think Rodgers could play well more than 2. I think Rodgers could play well more than 2 to 3 years if he wanted to, but I don't think he does.
But a part of that is, okay, his contract is he going to be worth $50 million a year in 2 years? So then you're paying $50 million a year for a quarterback who is okay. Obviously, you're not going to win a Super Bowl like that. So it's part of the question for sure. So let's keep moving on. Which, by the way, we're talking about the offseason and all this stuff and talking about the draft, Kyle. I forgot to mention it before. We're going to have the JetX simulator, offseason simulator backups. We're going to have to bring that back up on the show and make some cuts and do all that. Let's see. You won't sign for less. I'm doing that. Yeah, I'm assuming that's and mock drafts, etc. You'd be lucky to get 10 games a year with Jackson, given his history. His recent history, right? The last 2 years, he's missed 10 games total. So you're talking, and don't quote me on that, but you're talking about, he's only played 22 of 32 games, or I guess, it's been 17. So 22 of 34 games, whatever it exactly is. Do you want to pay $50 million a year for that? $45 million a year for that guaranteed, when his knee going forward is a massive question. Again, that's a question that's something that we have to say, I don't know, because we don't know what his knee looks like.
So. And by the way, so the one person who came at me on Twitter and called me a clown, don't know who the person was, but they said that both of Lamar's injuries in the past 2 years.
You haven't written down on the list. You ever see what is that? Is that what movie is that? Is that the movie with Adam Sandler? It's not Waterboy. What's the other movie where he's like a student? He's a student.
Little Nicky? No,
he's a student.
One.
It's wow. Of course, I'm blanking out on that now. Oh, he's a student. You know the guy I'm talking about.
I know exactly what movie you're talking about.
He's crossing people off with the list.
Billy Madison.
Billy Madison. Thank you. Yeah. You haven't written down on the list like that. You do.
Okay, but anyway, so the point of that is both of his injuries came from routine stuff in the pocket that could have happened to any quarterback. Okay, fair. Yes, but at the same time, is he more likely to get hurt from getting sacked in the pocket, where when you tackle a quarterback in the pocket, you kind of got to tackle him just right. You can't hit him too high. You can't hit him too low.
Yeah.
It's harder to get injured on a sack than it is when you're running full speed downfield and a linebacker can absolutely deplete you. Right. So granted, yes, those injuries didn't come on him running the football, but he moves around in the pocket more than some other quarterbacks do. So he's more likely to take a hit that way. And he does run downfield. So theoretically it could happen. And also part of it, you have to wonder too, okay, well, hits add up, right? There's a reason why running backs who have 400 carries a year or 300 something carries a year, it wears on them. So is he more likely to get injured from taking a hit in the pocket, because some of those hits are building up from some of the runs that he's also having. So yeah, anyway.
So it says Kubiak. I don't know if Kubiak's coming out of retirement. He's been retired for 2 years now, or whatever it may be. So and he hasn't been on the list of actual guys who were interviewing. So I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't see why. He's made a ton of money in his career.
SL James says, Joe and Kyle, what's up? It's Shaq. Hopefully Kyle remembers me. Do you remember a Shaq, Kyle?
Yes. All right. So Joe, the Lions game that I went to, and the very next week, the Jaguars game, the gentleman who was working security, checking people through the gate, very tall man. His name was Shaq. He's like, "Oh yeah, I watched you and Joe on the live streams." I was like, "Oh yeah, really?" I saw him back-to-back weeks. I went through the same gate, saw the same dude. What are the chances of that? But yeah, he said he likes the show.
Shaq, why does it take so goddamn long to get into the stadium? We're up with the lines there. I don't understand that whole thing, but nonetheless, I don't a lot of people bitch about the stadium in terms of getting out. But Kyle, you know how we do it, which is not always fun after we lose. But you sit in the parking lot, you take the grill back out, you take the beers back out, you wait an hour for everybody to leave. You watch them in the 4 o'clock games.
Yeah.
And then
it's always easier, Joe, after a win. How miserable
I
was
did
it
that.
sitting in that parking lot after we blew that game to the Patriots, Joe? You were,
I know.
You were so pissed.
Well, what did I say in that game? Was I right? I was like, dude, Zach Wilson's fucking done. We
Yeah.
need Carr. We need one of these
We
guys.
were,
I was
we were
right.
like, what's the chances that Zach Wilson can turn this around? And we were like, oh, it's gotta
and
be
what is it
less
right
than
now?
20%.
0, 1. You know,
One,
like
yeah,
it's,
maybe, yeah.
so
one.
we need Carr. We were so negative at that point about where we were going, and we were right. You know, we got here. So let's get Carr. Kyle's spitting facts as per Christian A. So Kyle, appreciate that. I know. His name is now. Oh, now Joe is spitting. Look at that, Kyle. We're both spitting facts.
Wow.
So Wilson is 23. Let's all relax. Wilson is 23 and has had
He's been
some of the
garbage.
worst 2 years of NFL quarterback we've ever seen in our entire lives. So the Jets are not relaxed about it. I'm sure we're not relaxed about it. If you think Wilson's the answer, you are one of the couple hundred people in here. Now there's 123. So you might be the one of the only. So Tierney. Okay, yeah, Tierney is the guy, I guess. Yeah, but he said like not sold with Carr. Don't want Jackson. Don't want. And he's like, again, this is the big wig WFAN guys who people depend on for their opinions. Is why we have so many people in here who we fight with.
What's
Like,
their
don't want Carr, don't want
listenership
this,
though? Like,
you know.
honestly, like with the
fall.
advent of podcasts, I have to imagine that they have lost so many listeners, percentage wise.
100%. And I'm being legitimate. Like I listen to some of their podcasts, all that stuff. I listen to more podcasts than I do the radio. I haven't listened to WFAN or ESPN in probably 4 or 5 years. Probably. Minus for like, okay, I'm trying to listen to a game or get some commentary on a game that's live. But for Michael K, Tierney, Francesa, who's the other big guys for who's the guy who like call like gambling?
You talking about Chris Carton or something?
Carton. Like I have listened to those guys in 5 because what do they know about? Like, what do they know? Nothing. Sorry, they don't know nothing. I know burn some bridges, whatever. That's me. That's not JetX. That's just Joe Blow's opinion on JetX's opinion, even though I'm part of it. So let's see. Joe, how do you dominate your fantasy leagues? I don't. It's funny because I'm not sure Eagles kind of approach this year. I go running back early. If I can go running back early, it's running back early because they're very hard to get. I took
fucking Javonte Williams in the first round.
But Eagles, a guy who goes, I think this year he went receiver and tight end early. Could be mistaken.
Took Justin Jefferson in the first round. I remember that.
Yeah, so he's a receiver early guy. I'm a running back early. Like I will reach for a running back.
There's less dominant running backs than there are dominant receivers.
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, like you can get lucky with receivers. Like I had Zay Jones in a couple of leagues, so I didn't think he was going to dominate or do anything, and he did relatively well for me. So I'm running backs early guy, like very, very, very early. So Jay says, great stream, guys. I'm worried we are doing the same old Jets thing where we panic after no immediate success and start to drift from whatever revision JD.
This is a very good point. Very good point.
Yeah,
it's a very good point, but it's the conundrum that you're in when you're a head coach and a GM that haven't had a winning season thus far. When you win, it buys you time to fulfill that vision. But at the end of the day, the game is about wins and losses. And that's how you're going to be judged by most people, including the people that employ you. So, sometimes you might have to drift from that vision to appease the people that write the checks.
Let's see. I think we got some trolls in here now.
I saw a lot of people talking about like wrestling, like
they
weren't trolling, but it was like, who would be out of all the wrestlers who would make the best Jets coaching staff or something.
Sorry, I muted those guys. So if they're actually,
no, I think they were I think they were just having fun. I don't think it was.
I assume that. I'm like, okay. Let's see. Somebody asked, did I miss any punter talk? No, James. And the punter talk is short. You get rid of Brady Man for $2.5 million. You signed the guy. And I was going to quote tweet it, but like more stuff was like.
By the way, would you be interested in signing the punt god Matt Ariza? He was cleared of all charges.
This guy got like.
That was the punter from I forget what San Diego State or whatever that the Bills drafted in what fourth, fifth round, he was cut because he was killing it in the preseason, and he was cut because he was accused of gang raping a girl or something. But the charges were dropped. If they're dropped, fine, why not? Like I don't, everybody's the guilty until or innocent until proven guilty. Yes, regardless, should Brady Man be the punter for the Jets? Absolutely not. He is absolute trash. So I'll get rid of him. Swolsey says
So, Solzy, the only problem I have with this is Geno and Tunsil or Carr or Lamar. So you're saying Carr, Lamar are both going to get paid the same, or Geno and Tunsil? Tunsil's getting paid like $25-ish million a year.
He wants
And
to be the highest paid tackle in the league.
And if you think you're getting Geno for much less than Carr or Lamar, you're mistaken. Geno, if he hits the open market, is going to get $35-40 million a year too, right? Like he's not going to get much less than those guys. Maybe it's $30 million because it's a smaller sample size. But Geno and Tunsil is going to cost you $55-60 million, where Carr is going to cost you 35 to 40, and Lamar might cost you 45.
Geno's not going anywhere. They're re-signing Geno.
And what is the franchise tag? Okay, so the franchise tag, correct me if I'm wrong, is the average of the top 5 salaries in the league at that current position. So Geno gets franchise tag, and what is it going to be? $40 million for 1 year?
Yeah,
and Tunsil is $25 to $30 million. You're talking about $70 million versus $40 million. So that's not real. That doesn't, in no world do you get Geno and Tunsil for the price of Carr or Lamar. So let's see. Great point. Thank you. I'm not sure if that's
I always wonder what Swolzy's thumbnail picture is. It looks cool, but I kind of can't tell what it is. Is it X-Men but dressed up in like Jets uniforms or something?
It's definitely
it looks like Wolverine and Gambit, and I could be totally wrong about that. But
I'm not a big Wolverine. I'm not a big X-Men guy, but some guy with wings and there's like an ice guy all the way in the background.
Is it fantastic? Is it Fantastic Five? I can't tell.
No, it's definitely not Fantastic Four has that big rock dude, right? Which that movie in the early 2000s sucked. That movie, I don't know if that was terrible. That was a shitty movie. Brian Leftwich. Girls just want to have fun. Yes, sure.
It's Byron Leftwich.
Yeah. Which, by the way, Bowles coming back is crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. And even like I said, Stanley coming back after some of the blunders they've had. How did they not run the ball more in that game against the Jaguars? So
yeah, but you know what though? Well, I mean, I guess not in the final half of that playoff game, but Staley's defense, the latter part of the regular season was really good, despite the injuries and stuff. So
Jay says, do you think we're banking on a lot on Breece Hall coming back fully healthy and looking just as good?
I'm honestly worried about it. I'm truthfully a little worried about it. I mean, like, ACL surgeries are a lot more routine than they used to be. I mean, like, if you speak to a lot of the running backs, Terrell Davis is obviously one of the best case points, like where, if you had an ACL surgery, there was a good chance you were never going to come back and be to the exact level that you were. Whereas we see many players come back and be, just as good. Like Deshaun Watson's had at least 2 or 3 ACL surgeries. Granted, he's a quarterback, not a running back or whatever. But, like someone like Thomas Davis, he had like 3 or 4 ACL surgeries in his career, the linebacker from the Carolina Panthers. But, it's a legitimate concern because running back, you're talking, cutting, planting on a dime more so than any other position. It's a legitimate question to know, is Breece Hall going to come and have that same level of explosion?
Yeah, I think it's safe to assume that you're going to wait. And I think he will eventually get back to that level. Now, is it September, 10th or 12th or 13th or whatever the opening day of the year is? I'm not sure, but I think he gets back to there. Just when is it exactly? And I think the Jets do have some good options behind him. It's not like they have, Breece and just Ty Johnson. You have Knight, who popped a little bit this year, obviously not as exciting down the stretch, and then you have Michael Carter, who you'd hope he bounces back because,
dude,
being realistic, Kyle, he sucked. He was very, very bad last year.
He was bad. I felt like for at least the early portion of the season, I felt like he was like, he wasn't really like, he was getting a really unfortunate share of the carries where a lot of the carries he was getting, like there just wasn't really a hole to run through. But as the season progressed, I felt like there were holes to run through. He just wasn't hitting them and he wasn't making guys miss the way that he was. Like,
not at all.
What was the line that we kept using last year? And I know Andrew.
He always broke the first tackle. He always broke the first tackle.
It wasn't the case at all this year.
Yeah, no, he barely broke tackles. And this is something I want to comment on when you were talking about Lamar and his knees and stuff like that. In terms of the mobility and stuff, it's not that pocket quarterbacks don't get injured, but you farther the injury risk if you run as well. It's not like a pocket guy can't get hurt, but if you run the ball, obviously you can get it's more of a chance. So SL James says we got our own employee gate and parking lot. Yeah, they got to figure it out a little bit better with the parking lot and the getting to a game sometimes, dude. It takes like 25 minutes. It's absurd.
If you leave early enough, you definitely like when we went to that Patriots game, we got in there early. We barely had there was like no line. But
Marcus asked, "Do you agree with Joe?" No, I think he's
that
probably,
can't be a serious question.
I think he's probably the exact definition of the guy you probably do not want to listen to on the radio.
He just appeals to a lot of people because like he's very emotional, and I assume some people find funny and very passionate. And he's got that Long Island accent. So like he appeals to people, certain listenership and stuff. But if you're looking
because he's like, let's be realistic, 70% of Jets fans. Like that's what a lot of fans are. There's not a lot of fans who are watching live streams and watching.
And by the way, he is a Jets fan. Like,
websites.
if I understand his story correctly, because I actually, true story, I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting, not as a student. I was thinking about enrolling there back.
You still can't keep up with Super Chats.
2014. Shut up. I've been pretty good, damn good today. You wanted to skip through a lot of these Super Chats where
you missed the first one for like 15 minutes, but we'll continue on.
Okay. Anyway, so if I understand correctly, Joe Beningo.
I'll do your job. Thank you, Privado, for the super sticker. I cannot see it. I don't know if anybody on YouTube can see it, but
that's Osmar. That is a former student of mine. Thank you, Osmar.
Oh, look at that.
Very generous.
Is I was about to say, if it's a former student, like, are you allowed to take his money, Kyle? I don't know how that works.
I don't see why not. He graduated anyway, and I didn't ask him anyway. But thank you, Osmar. Appreciate that. Hope you're doing well.
Sticker. Sorry. I can see it on the phone.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Why can't we not see that on? We can't see that on StreamYard. Why is that?
I don't know. I have no idea, to be honest.
Okay. Anyway, so I remember them telling us the story of Joe Beningo, and apparently, like, he was like a guy who was, I don't know, maybe in like his 40s or something like that. He was, I don't know what he did for work before that, but he was a guy who was very passionate about listening to talk radio and things like that. So he just wanted to pursue a career himself. Apparently, he called into the stations a lot. So he went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting, got an official broadcasting degree, and then he got hired by WFAN. So like he wasn't even one of these guys who like necessarily went to college for it as a young buck straight out of high school. So
I get like again, everybody's different. I get it for if you enjoy listening to it, but should you put all of your stock into his opinions? No. Like, but I'm not going to say, okay, you can't listen to something that you don't necessarily agree with. Like it could be like I watch stupid ass TV shows that are mindless, but I'm not necessarily like, I don't value them. Kind of like, do you have to value somebody's opinion to listen to them? Not necessarily. Right. Like, I don't know. Marcus Brady, we talked about him before, James. I would say that he is, and go listen to CYJ's podcast about him where they brought in a Colts expert. He is the second tier to me. Monken and Greg Olsen are probably my upper tier. I would say it's Monken as 1A and Olsen as 1B. But guys like Marcus Brady are in that second tier where I'd be happy with them being hired based on their, prior play calling experience, plus the fact that it seems like a lot of people around the Colts, whether it be former players, current players, or just guys who study their film, are saying that Marcus Brady was a little bit of a scapegoat. Now, am I guaranteeing he's going to be better than Mike LaFleur? Is he a slam dunk hire? No, but I'm much happier with Marcus Brady than the quarterbacks coach of the Eagles, who is below an offensive head coach, who's below the OC, who is now the quarterbacks coach. Like that doesn't work for me. I can't do that with, the Jets staff's job on the line. So let's see. So many Jets fans in here named James. Let's fucking go. James gang. Is there a bunch of James in here? I don't know. Let's see. Seems unlikely, but how about Reich? Again, the thing with Reich is, one, he's interviewing for head coaching jobs. And while I think he's blown up in the media, I don't necessarily understand exactly why. Like, I would be like, sure, he's a name and I'll trust other people, but what has he done that is like great? I was going to say the word. It was like X. Now I'm not sure how to pronounce it. What has he done that's so far and beyond a Monken? Like, if you told me right now, Kyle, Monken or Reich, I'm taking Monken because I've studied Monken a little bit more. And again, Reich was a guy who brought in Carson Wentz for the Colts and he kind of failed. So
I think part of the reason why people probably like Reich is he was a quarterback himself, played in the league too, had success. So, and he has won games.
Yeah,
but
there's a large difference between players who are good and coaches,
like an offensive innovator? Like when you think of like, so someone like Doug Peterson, like he's known as like a play designer, right? Like he's a guy who, when you think of Kyle Shanahan, this is a guy, or like a Sean McVay, like these are guys who like they draw up and they and like they kind of like create and push the narrative of the league, and like people want to copy them what they do. Is Frank Reich necessarily one of those guys? Probably not. So I don't know.
Yeah.
He definitely does bring the veteran presence, which, you know, bringing up the podcast, I was talking to AM, one of the co-hosts of the podcast that I was on a couple weeks ago, and he was definitely saying that he thinks that whoever the Jets offensive coordinator, it needs to be some type of veteran presence, right? Which could also be good for
I
Kyle.
agree.
And I don't have a problem with that at all. I think that's probably right. So at least Frank Reich gives you that too as well. And, you know, someone who does have
Part of
head
it.
coaching experience too, Saleh can also probably lean on him for some things as well. So, you know,
I think people talk about Reich like he's slam dunk the best prospect
I don't think he's a slam
possible.
dunk. No.
Where I might prefer at least Monken over him, maybe a Greg Olsen, but he's at least in the first tier or second tier where he's up there with, you know, the Marcus Brady's and maybe even above him. But I don't think he's some slam dunk where he should be giddy if he gets hired. He's obviously had his own failures as well in recent years. Bill Callahan, isn't he? He's been retired, right?
No, he's an offensive line coach.
Or who?
Is it the Cleveland Browns? I believe it's the Cleveland Browns.
Does he have play calling experience? Like, yeah, you could be a great position coach. Doesn't mean you're a great coordinator. Like, so I don't know. And the same thing with like former players. Like, listen, even with like we can go to the upper tier. Like Revis might be a great corner. Does that mean he's a great coach? He might not be a great coach. People talk about Nick Mangold being a great, you know, O-lineman for the Jets. Does it mean he's a great run game coordinator or offensive line coach?
By the way, doesn't
necessarily.
It seems like Nick Mangold is interested in the offensive line. Like I think I saw him
he quote tweeted it, about like wanting to come.
Yeah, there's no way you can hire a guy straight off the street to straight up be your offensive line coach.
Jeff Saturday was hired straight off the street as a
and he was hired
head
by
coach.
Irsay, who, dude, that was laughable.
Yeah. Benji, would you take
too much of a hothead
if he was interested?
Too much of a hothead.
There'd be a lot of rifts in the org. I wouldn't want that. Now past that,
but
Kyle,
by the way, dude, going and coaching under Nick Saban is a way to resurrect your career. He's done that with so many people, man.
Yeah. Let's see. I believe Reich will be now. Something else. Should we wait? Actually, we'll get to this really quickly. I got to end it by 9:00. But Quinn Williams, this is something obviously we could have talked about this with 200 plus viewers in here, but for the 120 who are still in here, the Quinn Williams thing, Kyle, how do you think that unfolds? What do you think the contract is? What are you comfortable with giving Quinn Williams, who I don't think made as big of an impact as I personally would have wanted the last week or two of the season? Maybe I missed something in the Dolphins game because, again, I'm being transparent. I didn't watch the film of that. I only watched a broadcast because I just couldn't deal with it. But nonetheless, what are you going to give Quinn Williams as a contract?
The Dolphins game.
And how much do you think his brother impacts his contract, like legitimately?
Whether or not they re-sign his brother?
Apparently, that's going to have something to do with how he feels about re-signing with the Jets. I don't think he's going to take less money if his brother's re-sign. I think at the end of the day, $24 million a year is $24 million a year. You know, so.
Listen, I think that's bullshit personally. If Quinnen says like, "Oh, I'm not going to re-sign with the Jets if you don't re-sign my brother," because like, what's the chances you're going to play with your brother elsewhere? And like the Jets took a chance on your brother and kind of resurrected his career, and they took a chance on you at 3rd overall. So I think that's bullshit and mostly just nonsense. And I don't think that's really going to factor into anything, first of all. Second of all, I think you have to absolutely pay him. I think if you're Joe Douglas and you're concerned about, I know you didn't draft him yourself, but after having the season that he did overall, first team all pro, right? When's the last time, forget special teams, but when's the last time the Jets had a first team all pro player?
Revis
back in what, 2015, right?
2010
maybe. Wow. Yeah. So you're talking like a long ass time ago. Yeah, two.
And we have two, and Mosley, who was second team, who, let's be realistic.
By the way, I love the intro to our show where I'm talking about Sauce Gardner, right? Man, we were absolutely wrong about Zach Wilson, but that one we were pretty damn
We're
good
watching that postseason, and I'm seeing Zach Wilson on there, Corey Davis. I'm like, dude, we might have to change this shit up a lot, a couple of weeks here. So we'll see.
All right. So Quinnen, what's his contract going to be? I think it's got to be close to somewhere. I think it's got to be like high 20s, if not 30s. right?
Really? Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be that high.
So like Aaron Donald's making over 25, if I'm not mistaken, right?
But
Maybe not 30. Okay, maybe not 30s. I'm having a tough time thinking about what all the defensive linemen salaries are right now.
they're
But
all like under 24, 25. It's
Okay.
all like 21, 22.
If Aaron Donald's making 20, Quinnen is young. Is he even 25 years old yet?
24. I think he's 24.
I think he's 24 right now.
Yeah.
I think you have to pay him over what Aaron Donald's making. Now, granted, he's never been at quite
Aaron Donald's
that
making
level.
like $31 million a year right now.
Okay. Yeah, I had a feeling he was over 30.
They gave him like some type of like crazy, obviously.
Yeah,
because
so like he's like
of
the
him in his
exception,
prime.
which honestly he earned it because there was nobody else like him for so long. And granted, like JJ Watt was kind of more of an edge player who could also kick inside. But other than those two, who's been that dominant on the D line? Nobody in recent memory.
No.
So, but Quinnen definitely has to get over 25, definitely. And I know that's going to exceed some of the edge defender contracts, but you have to do it. And I think he's able to command it. And part of it is because he's the 3rd overall pick. And I know Jason from Over the Cap has done like a lot of research. And one thing that I've learned from him is that it's not just how you do while you play in the NFL. It's not just your production on the field. It's also your draft status very heavily impacts future contract negotiations. So you're talking the third overall pick.
So I'm gonna read the highest contracts of defensive players per year. Obviously, a lot of it has to do with the guaranteed money as well. I would guess Q is right at about 25, 26. But you have Donald at 31. You have TJ Watt at 28. Joey Bosa at 27. Myles Garrett at 25. Crosby at 23. Khalil Mack at 23. Chubb at 22. Yeah, I would say $25, $26 million a year for Q is probably what you're gonna have to land him at.
Yeah,
is he worth it? Listen. At the end of the day, could you quibble about a couple $1 million and how long his sample size is? Sure, but do you want to get rid of all pro type players on your team for trying to hold on to a couple of $1 million so you could pay Braxton Berrios, $7 million a year? No, like keep him. But I think it's gonna be right around $25, $26 million a year if I had to guess.
Yeah.
Now with that, Quincy Williams, Kyle, because I don't know, I don't know where I saw it, but I think people are expecting him to be like $4 or $5 million a year, maybe $6 million a year for Quincy Williams. Like, what are you comfortable paying his brother? If it really legitimately does have something to do with how much Q wants to be here, which I think is bullshit, like you said. But just because we're talking about the Williams brothers at this point, what do you think he's going to be brought back for, if brought back at all? Which, if I had to guess, Quincy's back, Quan's not back. I could see them both being back, but I think Quincy probably is back.
Yeah, well, they got Quan for such a bargain, man. I'm talking like, what was he, like a little bit over 1 million?
It was like, I think it's like legitimately 1.5 right on the dot.
Yeah. Quincy, honestly, like I'm really not comfortable paying him like over 6 million, truthfully.
6, yeah, even 6 is high, right? Like
yeah,
I think realistically, what you're comfortable with, what would you pay, is a little bit different from a conversation. I think he's more of like a $3-4 million a year player, where maybe you're willing to go up to 5.5, but anything past that, I can't do it. But let's get into a couple of questions really quickly before we get off. Afram, based on what's out there, Greg Olsen works for me. Good body. You do, like, even without Carr, you're talking about a quarterback coach / OC who Derek Carr's best year, Greg Olsen. Blake Bortles, best year, Greg Olsen. Jared Goff's best year, Greg Olsen. So even without Carr, he's one of the upper tier names for me. Now, if he brings Carr, he's option number 1. But even regardless, like it's Monken, Olsen for me, and I don't think Reich's even obviously interviewed, so he's not really a real possibility. I would say past that, Marcus and Joe Brady, but Olsen's upper tier for me as well, regardless of Carr or not. Past that, what is Sauce and Garrett Wilson's new ceiling? Sauce's ceiling, if not already there, the best corner in the league. I would say he's top 5, not necessarily number 1 right now. Nonetheless, I'd have to really watch the other guys' films to really like figure out like my exact order. Sauce, ceiling, best corner in the league. Garrett Wilson, top 5 receiver, right? Like where can he reach, Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, like there's room for improvement with him. Like, he could do a little bit less body catching. He can improve his hands for sure. He can improve like his releases, specifically getting off jam a little bit.
Mhm.
You know, we talk so much about like, you know, how his long strides affect his breaks and stuff. I don't think it's as big of a problem as we made it out to be, but I think there's still even a little bit of room for improvement there. And like even like we expected him to do more with contested catches, specifically on vertical balls and stuff too. Like I'm saying, like, dude, like when he gets a quarterback who can deliver the ball better in those situations, like granted, he had a couple of these against the Lions and stuff, like, you know, like that one catch where the Lions defender had deep, he had pass interference deep downfield. I expect to see more catches from that, like Garrett Wilson, like more, you know, where he throw fades to him on the goal line, he goes up and gets it. I think you're going to see more of that when he has more competent quarterback play. So, yeah, I mean, Wilson, could he be a top 5 receiver? I don't see why not.
Yeah, like, and it's hard to say, like, okay, he's gonna be Justin Jefferson because Justin Jefferson's a savage. He's the best receiver in the league. But like right now, you have, you know, Jefferson, Adams, Hill, you know, Jamar Chase. But like past that, like who's to say he can't be a guy who's getting 1,500 yards a year? Like what would his stat line be if he had Derek Carr all year instead of a combination of Zach Wilson, Mike White, and Joe Flacco as his?
Could have easily had 200 to 300 more yards. That's not
exactly.
Like,
so you're talking about a 1,400 yard receiver in his first year. Like he's a top. He could be, his ceiling's a top 5 receiver. I think Sauce's ceiling is a number the best. Talking about Sauce.
Right, like all right. So like let's say, granted, listen, Mike White I think played his ass off in that Vikings game, but does Garrett Wilson have an 80-yard touchdown towards the latter part of that game if Mike White doesn't overthrow him right there?
Yeah,
it could be an 80-yard touchdown right there.
It's one play.
Yeah.
Also Sauce blanket Tyreek Hill so bad. And the thing up, so I'm doing Saucer now in terms of a full year review. I'm doing him, Q, and Garrett Wilson. I'm noticing in the second half of Sauce's season, at least after the bye week, a little bit more patient with his feet and a little bit more forward lean in terms of him off of the snaps. So that's obviously a very good thing for Sauce. So I've been noticing that at least the last couple of weeks. We'll see if it continues. But he actually improved throughout the year as well, which is great. Now, Eagle, again, we have to get through these pretty quickly, Kyle. Eagle Fang, question for Kyle. Jermaine Johnson's rookie year of the Jets. How do you feel about it?
I can't rate him higher than a C. No way I can rate him higher than a C. I mean,
run defense very good.
It's pretty much what I expected it to be, honestly. And truthfully, I would have wished, like just being optimistic, you take him, what, 23rd? Was it 26? 26, right? 26 in the draft. I still wish I saw more from in the pass rush department. I'm not shocked with what I saw because we kind of expected it, but there's just so much of it. Like watch, and he did get more pass rush steps at the later part of the season, but so much of it is just like he's a 4.55 guy, so he should, and his 10-yard split, if I'm not mistaken, is also very good, but he's not that explosive out of his stance. And then when he gets to the contact point, when he approaches the offensive tackle, it's just like, oh, I guess I'm going to bull rush him now.
Yeah.
Right. And it's just,
he needs more creativity.
And honestly, for his he's big, he's jacked up, he's twitched up. Even when he bull rushes, he doesn't get that much movement. There's not that much speed to power right now. So he's got a long way to go as a pass rusher. So I can't, just effort. And, you know, he has big special teams play, right? He had a safety, right, against Buffalo, if I'm not mistaken, with the block punt. So I give him a C.
I would say C plus, or even maybe B minus. His run defense was even better than I thought it would be. Like he was very good there. Pass rushing obviously
better than we thought you'd be. You were really high in his run game. You loved.
He was good. He was good in the run game for sure. June, can we talk about? We're gonna go over a full list. Like I have the OTC pulled up. We're not gonna do that now. Obviously, it's 9:06. We'll do that more in the front side of a show. You're looking at Braxton Berrios. You're looking at CJ Mosley. You're looking at Corey Davis. You're looking at Jordan Whitehead. Does Wayne Brown retire? There's plenty of guys to make cap space. And again, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of not only this year. No, this year's not as much flexibility, but you have to consider there's a lot of flexibility in 2024, so they could backload some stuff and figure it out. Yoshi, another good point about Garrett Wilson, knowing where the sticks are. Very good point about his route running.
That's a bigger problem for Elijah Moore than it is Garrett Wilson. How many times did he run back? Yeah.
I think you might be selling Reich short OC for Wentz's best years, but he was under Peterson, who was a offensive head coach. So how much stock do you put in offensive coordinators under offensive coaches? That's obviously a case-by-case basis, I guess. We have to have a lot more knowledge into who's actually calling the plays. won a Super Bowl with Foles. Again, that was Peterson. Had 3 really good years with Rivers.
Luck wasn't washed. Maybe mentally his heart wasn't in the game as much, but washed from a talent perspective, no. But he was coming off a brutal shoulder injury.
That's like
But
the
he still
same thing.
played-
It's like
he still played good though in his last year.
it's like, oh well, Bieniemy won a Super Bowl with Mahomes. Is that Bieniemy or is that obviously Andy Reid? Like it's different when it's a defensive head coach under or an OC under a defensive head coach, but when you have an OC under an offensive head coach, how much of it was his offense? Even with what's his face? We can talk about Bevel, which he was not going to take an interview anyway. But like people talking about, oh, he's a terrible OC candidate for the Jets, but he was calling plays for Meyer, who is the offensive head coach. So how much of it was his offense, etc. But nonetheless, Kyle, last words here. We went for 3 hours and 10 minutes, so I think we should end it here. We have a lot of time to talk about a lot of topics, so let's spread it out a little bit. Plus, I gotta break a 27-hour fast at this point. I gotta eat some food, so I gotta head off. But
I've done a lot of fasts, but I don't know if I've done 27 hours with no food. It was really fun. First time in 3 weeks, so we went a little long for this one. But honestly, like, dude, I mean, like I felt like the time flew by. We got a lot of super chats tonight. Thank you for all of you, especially. I mean, like, thank you for everyone, but especially the people that gave the super chats. And a lot of the people, dude, when you guys give good comments and good questions and things like that, it makes the stream so much faster. And basically we don't even need to think that much. You guys give us a lot of the material for us. I would just suggest that people go and check out the Cool Your Jets podcast. I'm saying this without even listening, but I respect those guys and like the work that they do a lot. So go and listen to some of those podcasts about the offensive coordinators. Cause right now I just downloaded the one about Greg Olson, the one about Brian Johnson or Kevin Patullo, Nick Caley, Joe Brady, and Marcus Brady. And they also had one on Bevel, who's not going to be the offensive coordinator, but they one on him as well. So yeah, go and check those out. And there's a lot of great content at Jets X Factor, and Joe Blewett, I'm sure, is going to be pumping out some more film reviews soon. So yeah, subscribe to the site. You can get the first month free. That's all I got to say. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you, Kyle. Appreciate everybody who check out the Jets X Factor stuff, minus the writers who are studying the PFF stuff. We'll figure that out.
You're going to fire them now, Joe?
Yeah, they're fired. So I will be posting Sauce Gardner full season reviews, Garrett Wilson, Q, and then obviously stay here for what's going to be extensive reviews of offensive systems and quarterbacks.
Did you get a Garrett Wilson jersey yet?
I did not. My wife actually does not like him, apparently. She thinks he drops too many balls. I was explaining to her, like, he's about to win rookie offensive rookie of the year. So
she's not wrong about that.
We'll see. But we appreciate you guys. We will see you soon.